I had a sneaking suspicion last time that I got a strike that it would behoove me to start streaming happy hour on my second channel, Actively Unwoke, because I was always going to move it here eventually, YouTube. And now, because I can't stream on my primary channel for the ridiculous strike that you gave me for content that you had already reviewed and monetized and approved, I'm like, good to go. Because every single Friday at 3 p.m., as you know, I usually simulcast this happy hour stream on my primary YouTube channel, this YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, while also putting it live on Rockfin and Odyssey just to have backups. So we're just operating as business as usual YouTube. Well, guys, welcome to Happy Hour. We may have a smaller group today, but that's okay because we're going to enjoy ourselves anyway. Because that's what Happy Hour is all about. We watch a woke training. We mock it relentlessly. I drink. I gotta be honest. I'm feeling a little under the weather today. I'm feeling a little under the weather. I don't even have my big light on because it's hot as heck in my office and it wasn't adding that much more light anyway. And so I have a little less energy today. Don't worry, I'm not like sick or anything. I'm just like tired. That's all it is. But we're still gonna do happy hour anyway. Now, just because I'm feeling a little less energetic today, that doesn't mean I'm not drinking. Doesn't mean I'm not drinking. I don't have my big glass today because it's dirty, but I have a moderately big wine glass that I will be drinking. And I will be drinking my Southern Tier Imperial Pumpkin Ale, my favorite beer of fall, 8.6 alcohol. It tastes just like pumpkin pie. So we're going to get that going. Oh, it's so deceptive. It's so deceptive. All Southern Tier beers are amazing. Look at that. Perfect. Looks just like apple cider, doesn't it? Ooh, almost dropped the cup. Okay. So, because of events going on in the world, I thought that we would watch something about the Middle East today and something about the Middle East and queer studies or gender studies. And so we're going to be watching a little bit of a different topic. Usually we do like white fragility or critical race theory. We're shifting into queer studies today. I don't think we've ever No, we did watch that one queer studies college lecture, didn't we? Where we had like that trans college professor who didn't do you guys remember this? The trans college professor who didn't realize that the guy in the mascara commercial who was the makeup artist was gay and was talking about him as though he was part of a heterosexual couple with his like female best friend. That's the only other queer studies thing that we've watched. So this is going to be queer studies part 2, but we do have a couple orders of business to take care of. Let me just share my screen. This is the training we're going to be watching today. Queer Studies, Activism in the Middle East. And this is actually relatively new. This is from Brown University, and this was actually filmed back in March. Unintended consequences, Brown University. But we would still want to try to play our Unwoke bingo. So that is something you can find in the description of the stream, regardless of if you're on YouTube or Odyssey or Rockfin. Get your Unwoke bingo card, come here, generate the card. Every card is different. You get your free space in the middle. Then you try to do a line with our unwoke words, or you can do the corners as well. Just yell bingo into the chat when you got it. You don't win anything. It's just for fun, just to keep us to mute. Just make sure we're paying attention, but you do get bragging rights. We are still waiting for someone to get a blackout bingo, because once we get the first bingo, then we try to go for blackout bingo. I have a feeling we're gonna hear some of these words today, so we're gonna see. But we have yet to get a blackout bingo. If you get blackout bingo, you get bragging rights forever as being the first person ever to get it. So make sure you get your bingo card up on your screen. And then, of course, guys, I would love if you could join my locals community and make sure you're supporting me there. Listen, to be serious for a second, I got a BS nonsense second strike on my primary YouTube channel today. One more strike and I'm gone for good. And so it's more important than ever to make sure you're in my locals. Now, locals is 100% free to join. You can join for free. I'm going to say it again. You can join for free at kb.locals.com. The free access gets you ad-free videos. It allows you to see what's going on in the community, so you can decide if it's a place you want to be. But if you want to support the work I'm doing, there's a whole bunch of ways you can do it. You can become a monthly supporter at $5 a month. You can give an annual gift at $50 a month, and you get 2 months for free with that. Or you can actually make just a one-time gift if you just want to help out what I'm doing. Listen, with this stupid YouTube strike, I've lost 2 weeks of revenue on YouTube. I'm pretty pissed about it because a lot of times with my business, like I take money that I make from one area and I invest it back into like doing other things. And I had already earmarked that money for something, and I'm pretty pissed about it. So if you want to help me out, it would really be great if you could become a member of my locals. Did I say $50 a month? $50 annually, Adrian. Adrian's spreading fake news in the chat. No. So, but guys, it really would help me out if you could join my locals. If you've ever done a super chat on here, I love super chats on here. I'm not going to put them down at all. But the fact of the matter is if you become a member on locals or give through locals, I get to keep more of the money. You're not giving money to YouTube. You're giving money directly to me and also to Ruben and his team, who are making a place for us where we will never be canceled. Adrian, if I said $50 a month, I'm sorry. I'm tired. I'm not feeling good. Cut me some slack. You know how much it is a month. Come on. But I really want to get, so right now I've had about 23 new paying members join since this whole YouTube nonsense started. I'd really like to get 100 new paying members. That's the goal. I want to, by the end of next week, when this stupid, nonsensical strike is over, I would like 100 new paying members in my locals. And I also just want to do a special shout out because I've actually had a lot of people have stepped up and made one-time gifts to kind of bridge this gap that YouTube is costing me for being Nazis. And I really do appreciate it. Like, a lot of people have made gifts on top of like already being a member of locals or things like that. So really, thank you guys. I can't thank all of you enough. It really, it puts my mind at ease, and I'm very grateful for all of you, and I love my locals community. All right. Who is ready to watch Queer Studies Activism in the Middle East? Let's see. That's not the button I wanted to hit. What's everyone drinking today in the chat? Anyone drinking anything good? As I'm figuring out how to set this up properly. Let's see. Just looking in the chat, seeing what you guys are talking about. Oh, Skid Mark, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate it, buddy. That's awesome. All right, Mountain Dew. Kieran's drinking tea. Boring. That's all right. I will drink, even though I'm not feeling good. I will take one for the team. Citrus Venom. Grandma Nay is drinking the most interesting thing of all. My God. All right, guys, let's dig in and watch our training. And as always, let me know if you can't hear the sound.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event on queer studies and activism in the Middle East. Today, I will be in conversation with Riva Saik, Sabiha Alouche, and Rassan Moussaoui. My name is Nadir Ali, and I'm currently the director of Center for Middle East Studies here at Brown University, where I'm also professor of anthropology and Middle East studies. So let me introduce today's guest to you. Riva Saik is a queer feminist writer, publisher, and archivist from Lebanon. Welcome, Riva. She is a founding editor of Kohl, a journal of body and gender research, and the co-founder of Intersectional Knowledge Publishers.
Question. How hard is it to create an academic journal? Because they just said this woman was a founder of like an academic journal, right? Can we just create our own academic peer-reviewed journal? Like, how hard is that? I know I've got some PhDs in the chat. I don't actually think it's that hard. We could just do it, right? We could just make the choice to create our own peer review official academic journal. Someone tell me that's possible, please.
She's currently based in Paris, France, where she's pursuing an MA in gender studies at Université Paris.
We should definitely start a journal.
I'm going
to add that to the unwoke list in the Discord.
Sex and sexuality, queer geographies and migration, global economies, and feminist histories. I would also like to welcome and introduce to you Sabiha Alouche. Sabiha obtained her PhD in gender studies from SOAS University in London in 2018. She is an interdisciplinary researcher whose work bridges the gap between political analysis and anthropological writing. She is on the advisory board of COHEL and lectures at the University of Exeter's Politics Department. Sabiha dedicates herself to producing decolonized knowledge and uncovering the racialized,
decolonized
sex, and gendered
knowledge
logics that constitute our world. You can read her publications in COHEL.
What do we think decolonized knowledge means? How does one produce decolonized knowledge? Any guesses in the chat?
In COHEL and several Middle East academic journals. Welcome, Sabiha. And now I'd like to introduce to you Ghassan Moussaoui. Ghassan is assistant professor of gender and women's studies and sociology at the University of...
Did you guys hear his title? Who heard his title? Chat in his title. I want to see if you're paying attention. Here, we'll rewind. We'll rewind just slightly. Okay, 216. Okay. Okay, pay attention. Pay attention. Okay, pay attention to his title. You're gonna laugh.
Welcome, Sabiha. And now I'd like to introduce to you Ghassan Moussaoui. Ghassan is assistant professor of gender and women's studies and sociology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Assistant professor of women's studies. Just who I want teaching me women's studies, a man.
He works and teaches in the areas of transnational gender and sexuality studies, racialized sexualities, queer theory, and queer of color critique.
Is he trans?
And of course, today we are.
Do we think he's
part
trans?
Of today's conversation will be around his recently.
There's nothing wrong with that. I don't really care. I'm just curious.
Here.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it trans. I'm calling trans.
And queer strategies in Beirut. And the book focuses on everyday life disruptions.
You know how I know he's trans? Because he's a male professor of women's studies. And I feel like that started before, and, you know, that's all. Nothing wrong with being trans, YouTube. I don't really care. I'm using he pronouns, okay?
And violence and queer formations in post-war Beirut. Welcome, Ghassan. Welcome, all of you. I'm so happy that we'll be in conversation today. Now, those of you who have been following our events,
I can't wait to hear him speak. We'll know when he speaks.
Know that I have been trying to open up a space for discussions and conversations around the centrality of gender and sexuality.
You're right. He might be
in our attempts at
two-spirit, non-binary, whatever,
understanding and engaging with processes, trends, and phenomena linked to the Middle East and its diasporas. And here, what has become more and more apparent are the intersections of patriarchy, heteronormativity, with a range of issues linked to authoritarianism, militarism, sectarianism, and so on. But gender and sexuality are also key in the various forms of resistance and mobilization against authoritarian governance and different forms of inequalities.
Yes, I'm sure there is a significant amount of resistance against authoritarian government in Afghanistan today, isn't there? I'm sure the resistance is alive. Well, no, not maybe alive. No, not maybe alive.
And injustices. And in today's event, what I'd like to do is focus specifically on queer studies as an angle and queer activism as a form of resistance in the context of the Middle East.
Queer activism as a form of resistance in the Middle East.
In the relation and tensions between feminist movements and thought and LGBTQ movements and approaches in the region historically and in contemporary context, as well as the relationship between the more liberal, rights-based LGBT activism as opposed to queer feminist approaches and activism. And Riva and myself have written about this in a chapter, mainly with reference to Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, and Iraq. Now, some of you who are attending today's event might have also attended the launch of the most recent issue of COHEL on queer feminism. I mean, the launch was definitely extremely special and was a wonderful event. But what also became apparent was that it was part of a much longer development and process.
Yeah, it really
in which
does.
Kohol,
It really
but also a
does.
whole range of activists, researchers, and academics have been collaborating, thinking, reflecting on what queer feminism might mean and what it could do. And Rassan, who is with us, is of course one of them, and his book fits into that trajectory as well. So what we're going to do, I'll be in conversation with my guest today for about an hour or so. And I encourage you to post your questions or comments in the Q&A function, and we will have at least half an hour at the end for discussion. So, at any time, if you have a question,
It's a
please
good
put it in.
question, Ben. It's a good question.
And also,
Benjamin, sorry,
if
Benjamin.
you know of anyone, who would like to listen to our conversation in Arabic, there is translation available. So you just go to the interpretation function and click on the Arabic button. Okay. Okay, let me start with you, Riva. And of course, I have to say that it's been such a great privilege and amazing learning opportunity to have been involved with Kohel, with the journal as an advisory board member. And I'm extremely grateful, for this opportunity. And I was wondering if you could introduce the idea behind Kohel to us and to tell us, how the journal links feminist queer knowledge production and activism. And also, I mean, of course, I've been involved as an advisory board member for 5 years, and I've seen, there have been lots of transformations and shifts. Can you speak a little bit about these developments over the 5 years?
Yeah, boring start, Adrian, but that most of the time.
Hello,
listen, hang on.
Thank you.
I'm gonna pause this real quick. Sometimes a boring start means like in the middle somewhere, it's gonna go completely off the rails. Like that has happened several times where we get into something where like this kind of sucks, it's kind of boring, there's not really a lot going on, and then all of a sudden, boom, the crazy starts. So we have to sometimes be patient. This is why we play bingo. This is why we drink. Sometimes you have to get your vegetables in before you get to the good stuff. And if it's still boring after a while, we change it and find something else to watch.
So much. Let me start by expressing how wonderful it is to be here. And thank you, Nadia, for inviting me and organizing this. I'd also like to thank my fellow panelists or co-conversationists, Sabiha, who's been a rock in the past year and a half with her wisdom and generosity, and Ghassan, whose book speaks intimately to me as it portrays queer life as a tactic of doing politics. And maybe this can link into what you've just asked me in terms of, the different developments that we've seen in Kohol. And I think it really inscribes in the as part of a much larger development that has to do with queer knowledge as praxis, that we are
queer knowledge as praxis
institutions. And
so we need to start listening for any time they say something, something, something in praxis, because what that is essentially, anytime you hear praxis, think of like in practice, like they're putting it into practice somehow. That's generally what they mean when they say that. It's not just theory anymore. It's going into like the real world. So like James Lindsay says this a lot. It's like, so he says in schools, it's critical race theory in praxis, in practice.
Geographies as well. So it is a kind of knowledge and praxis that is really Southern and that challenges how is it that we traditionally see the sites of knowledge and power. And maybe my entry point here, instead of it being Kohol, it's a bit unorthodox, but what I would like to do in order to maybe understand what has informed those changes in Kohol is to really start by taking a moment to talk about what is going on in Lebanon right now. Just to reflect a bit on the sheer horror of hopelessness and despair that settle in as a new kind of normal, because this is the reality of capitalism. It is the reality of power and greed and control and extractivism.
All right, we may have just hit the crazy train. Did everyone catch it? Do we need to rewind? Let's rewind. Let's rewind a bit, shall we? Let's go back to like 8 minutes.
But what I would like to do in order to maybe understand what has informed those changes in Kuhl is to really start by taking a moment to talk about what is going on in Lebanon right now. Just to reflect a bit on the sheer horror of hopelessness and despair that settle in as a new kind of normal, because this is the reality of capitalism. It is the reality.
Horror and despair and hopelessness setting in as a new kind of normal, because that is the reality of capitalism. Critical race theory is not, I know I have to say this every single time, and I know the people that are here this week are regulars. You guys have probably heard me say this a million times, but critical race theory is not about race. Critical race theory is about power. They call things whiteness that basically signify who owns the power structure. That's why when we had that article come out in the LA Times a week ago today, actually, that said Larry Elder is a white supremacist, what that means is that they perceive Larry Elder to be the owner of the power. It's not about his skin color. It's about who owns the power. And anyone who owns the power is considered white under these ideas, right? So when we get to the idea of like why capitalism is the greatest evil that ever was, well, capitalism is all about private property. They want to destroy that. They want to destroy capitalism. That's what they think is going to give them the most power.
Of power and greed and control and extractivism.
Look at him nodding. Look at him nodding.
But in a way, maybe, and to think of this tradition, okay, the tradition of queer knowledge as praxis. What is new to us?
Queer knowledge is practice.
She
She just said
others. In fact, it seems to be a recurring political weapon, and I'm talking here about, economic collapse and inflation and crisis that is mobilized particularly in West Asia or the Middle East, which is where we are talking from, as well as other parts of the global South. And maybe to understand what an archive like Kuhl would do in terms of, queer knowledge and queer discourse, maybe we can take a look at the discourse that is out there right now about what's going on in Lebanon. So when we look at headlines, it says running out of time, what next, a matter of when, not if. So it's as if it's some sort of video game or spectacle that seems to be entertaining or even like enjoyable to an outside gaze. And so this is what being consumed feels like. And I think we've always resisted to this notion of being consumed, and we can talk about it later. In terms of what the reality is, like the material reality is, there's a feeling of being stuck between different sites of power. You have the IMF, the World Bank, states promising aid, wanting to discipline and punish the politicians on the one hand. And how could we not take a stance on this kind of, game that happens on the international global scene? And on the other hand, we have the corrupt system held by sectarian warlords that would not budge and that still employs the same methods of terror and intimidation and repression. So basically, what it does to us and our understanding of queer knowledge and praxis is maybe reinforce this idea or further erode the master's tools as tools that we can use. So we can no longer
further erode the master's tools. Hang on, do you guys hear that? Further erode the master's tools. They consider capitalism the master's tools, by the way.
What it does to us and our understanding of queer knowledge and praxis is maybe reinforce this idea or further erode the master's tools as tools that we can use. So we can no longer count our gains as progress, because our gains are not quantifiable, they cannot be linear. And in that,
our gains are not quantifiable because they believe in qualitative information over quantitative information. I don't think there's anything wrong with qualitative information. When I do research, I'm a qualitative researcher. I do not research using quantitative styles, but there are different ways to do it. And these people, most of the time, do not do it the correct, proper way that follows the correct procedure. So that's what she means by that. They don't believe in objectivism. They don't believe in any of these things. They believe in just qualitative lived experiences based on, what one person happens to think happened.
I regard Kohl's praxis as an exercise of opening up, of creating that which will not be given to us, is something that,
creating that so she said this is about creating that which will not be given to us. What she means by that is that this goes back to the whole master's tools ideas, right? They believe that if capitalism is in place, they're going to have to overthrow the masters in order to gain access to whatever they want. They don't believe it's ever going to be given to them because they believe that the entire system has been created to keep the masters, the owners of the power, in power and to keep everyone else oppressed.
Doing
like how serious
the years, but I think it's something that has become really dear to us in the past 2 to 3 years, given everything that's been going on. So why is a political project like Kohl that mobilizes queer knowledge production a form of activism? On the surface, it has accompanied these questionings in its praxis as they unfolded. So we were very much concerned at the beginning of Kohl being created with the consumption aspect of things, and particularly what we called back then Western consumption. We
Western
still are,
consumption,
in a way, but I think we have thought alongside those who came before us, those who happened to be in overlapping spaces and times.
I mean, I would really like, what I hope to hear in this talk is what they think the Middle East would look like without Western colonial values. What do they think it would look like if you removed all that? That's the question.
Like Hassan with us today, I hope. And the idea is not only to document what is out there, but to archive it with our bodies, to imagine what could be, to live by that praxis, and to live alternatives, and alternatives that are queer alternatives, not as an identity.
Yes, I'm sure the Middle East is going to be very, very open to queer alternatives. Does anyone else think that might be a problem? I'm just saying.
But as a political worldview, and this is the work that Kohl is concerned with right now.
Thanks so much, Riva, and I also really appreciate that you sort of started out by reminding us, of course, of the, situation in Lebanon, and too often we're kind of, talking in the abstract, and these very sort of real material realities, which of course are sort of multi-layered, and clearly, I mean, another element is the pandemic that is, in fact, I mean, that is already happening in a context of very harsh inequalities and forms of injustices. And yeah, thanks for that. Sabiha, if I may turn to you and follow up. I mean, so I know that your involvement in Kohl is more recent. You joined maybe a couple of years ago, the advisory board, but of course you've been following and reading and being, I mean, I know you've been following closely what Kohl has been producing, but now you're sort of at the heart of it, and you've been actually...
I just want to take a sec to thank Node86 because I think you're in the chat. Thank you for the one-time support over on Locals. I do appreciate you making that on Locals instead of making it through the evil empire of YouTube. So thank you guys for that. Guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing, definitely make sure you get over to Locals, become a member of Locals. You can super chat here and do stuff too if you want to. I understand not everyone wants to be on Locals, but it really does help me out when it runs through Locals. If for no other reason, then I get to keep more of the money. Thank you, guys.
Very much involved in the workshop that eventually led to the production of the queer feminism issue. So, the idea of bringing people together in a workshop in Beirut. And I was wondering if you could reflect a bit on that experience of being part of that workshop, and then the process to then the publication of the special issue on queer feminism.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Well, I think to answer this question, I was indeed, I did join Kohl a bit later, but actually I also entered academia quite late. I wrote my first essay ever when I wrote my MA. My BA was in a vocational route. It was completely different from what we understand as high theorizing. And also, I'm not an activist by trade. I confronted my privilege really, really quite late in life, I would say. And
what privilege did she confront exactly? I'm wondering. What privilege did she confront?
When I was at that workshop, like just to sit there at 40 years of age, listening to all these brilliant minds and really young, like there was at least a generation, easily a generation between me and most of our authors, and listening to them express, right, their version of in-betweenness, but also like coming of age in this, all these material conditions that Riwa have just told us about. And it just really made me realize that
we lost him.
Maybe the whole
we
whole
lost the
world
man.
is basically wrong.
They kicked
right?
the man
Maybe
out.
The young should lead, and we should follow. And this seems to be really my newfound motto, I guess. Everything I seem to produce and think about this day is maybe the young should lead.
It was probably drop connection.
Follow.
I understand. It's just more fun.
Supposedly the experts, those that are more established, those that have done their homeworks of being a responsible citizen, contributing to life, paying our taxes, etc. And this realization is really one great way to...
The hardest part of watching these trainings is that they never just get right into the content. And this is because, right, like, what do they value above all else? They value lived experiences. So they always start off with like an hour and a half worth of story time where they might say some crazy things, and genuinely they do. But it's just like you have to wait through this 20-minute story of their lives about how they came to do what they're doing and their feelings about doing what they're doing, and why this is so important work and how they've confronted their privilege, and we just have to suffer through it. It's just part of what these trainings are. And it explains why all of these people on the woke left just speak in terms of like, here's how I feel and here's my story and this is why it's so important to me, and then they cry, and it's like, oh my God, just get down to it.
Capture, I hope, right, the reach and the scope of queer studies, literally to turn the word.
It's like listening to Charlie Brown's teacher. That's what it is. It's like listening to Charlie Brown's teacher.
As per the future that you envisage. And and there was a lot.
By the way, guys, quick plug, quick impromptu plug. So I got these cool vaccine passports from bringammo.com. They sent them to me. It's really cool. It's got a QR code on it, and I want you guys to guess where the QR code goes for these vaccine passports. But if you ever want to get, like, Bring Ammo is an awesome site. They got so much fun stuff. And if you ever want to get you can get 10% off your whole order just by putting my first name in the promo code. So just my first name, Karlyn. But anyone want to guess where these QR codes go to on the vaccine passport? I'll give you guys a sec. Kieran can't guess. He already knows.
Say there was some cynicism, a little bit. There were some, the infamous imposter syndrome, right? Manifesting. Sometimes even a disconnect. If you just looked at all of us, like there was just a clear disconnect between us. But
all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a quick pause. Everyone get out your QR code reader. I'm gonna make myself full on the screen, and I'll let you scan the QR code. I wonder if this will work. Let me know if you can scan this, if this works. Can you scan the QR code? All right, someone let me know if you got it. We'll keep going.
And there was also this
Adrian got it.
and instantaneous attachment to a political project that
it brings you to the Constitution, Adrian. Be more specific.
Sooner than expected. Like the workshop lasted 4 days, and I think it took, I don't know, half a day, maybe just after the first coffee break. I mean, coffee and biscuits always help for it, right, to become clear. And it made things really easier from that point onwards. Because even though the state, like the violence of the state was present, or the nuclear family, or religion, or migration, etc., and all these realities were part and parcel of not only the analysis, right, that was
oh, he's back.
Being undertaken,
the patriarchy is back.
But it clearly was evident, like this is part and parcel of our everyday life, right? But also what happened during the workshop, and maybe I'm not the best person to speak about it on this point, is because I did not join, at some point we all went to join the revolution that was happening, in the street. And it wasn't a workshop that, no one was reinventing, like, it was really raw, like the way it was written down. This is a lived reality, a theory that comes from the lived reality. The powerful working of theory, being able to construct a we based on all these seemingly disconnected eyes, really became evident there.
The hell is she talking about?
Idea,
I want to see some word salad in the chat. I want to see some salad.
At some point, we
don't have our custom emojis this week, but we can still do salad.
And we're talking about all these different bodies so we had Pakistan, Sudan, Turkey.
I have no idea what she's talking about, but there's definitely
Kuwait,
salad emojis out there, I think.
Diasporic people.
My emojis aren't working right now.
And you eat this Armenian food, and you're like, what does it mean,
Reagan's
right,
got it.
Our Armenian, for example, peers in Lebanon to be stuck in this state that one day swears allegiance to, Turkey, one day to another Sunni entity. What about, the Armenian roots? What about not finding support, right, around you in terms of, for example, the Armenian history? And it's just like, you can't afford not to be aware, right, of the world map and of the geopolitics and the events that happen around you. And in that sense, theorizing became feasible. And I'm going to be very honest, at some point I felt very much like I don't want to say imposter, intruder. I felt like I was the academic
found
one.
it.
And at maybe until the second day, I was convinced that I was the responsible one who was supposed to slow things down. Should we get too experimental? Should we become too sophisticated theoretically? Because I'm being sarcastic here, but we're not supposed to theorize, right? We're supposed to apply queer theory. But before I knew it, I was like, forget your books.
Wait. She just kind of, see, this is what you have to listen to the word salad. Even when it's word salad, sometimes they say things that are important. She says it's not our job to theorize, it's our job to apply queer theory. Okay?
Forget your theoretical framework.
No, she does not realize this is not a therapy session. This is exactly the flipping point. She does not realize this is not a therapy session. She thoroughly thinks she doesn't have any sense of how a therapy session is different from a seminar for Brown University. This is an Ivy League university. In theory.
Easier. Because, she would be like, why are you coming back here to the theory? It took me time to get into it. And
frozen. Zoom and no, never mind.
Reading this material, I should have been more experienced and I should have been less attached to the theory, right, and more aware by virtue of my expertise that you can let go of theory, but it wasn't easy, to do, and so yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for reflecting on your experiences. I mean, I guess for me, listening and to this, and I've heard some of it before. It also really sort of brings back what I associate with Kohol, or some of the things that I associate with Kohol. One is the bridging in terms of academic and activist knowledge, but also very importantly, those of us who are academics and who work in the kind of academic world, we know that journals are not places where you get lots of mentorship and where people support you, and where the focus is on process, the focus is on product. And many of us will be traumatized by the comments of the peer reviewers, and
they will be traumatized by the comments of the peer reviewers. So I think, guys, I really think that this is even more reason to start our own academic journal, because we don't want people to be traumatized by the peer review. In fact, like, I feel like all of my locals members and we should just start our own academic journal where we do the peer review. We don't do traumatizing peer review at all. Actually, it would be kind of funny. What if we all just did like a reaction video to every crazy article we got submitted? We should start a secret. Here's what we need to do. We should start like a serious like critical race theory journal, like one of the grievance studies. We need to pick out a grievance studies, make it look totally legit, start something that looks completely and totally legit, make up like basically what we need to do is build, and I'm saying this on the internet, but like only 50 people are watching, so it's okay. Like, what we need to do is build on the grievance studies affair and just go to the next level. Start our own journal with all made up staff, with all made up peer review. See if we can get academics, see if we can get real, legitimate academics to submit to our completely fake journal. See if we can get libraries to include this is like a long-term project. This is not something that's going to happen on a weekend. See if we can get libraries to include our completely fake journal. See if we can get news stories written about this stuff that gets included in our completely fake journal. I think, and we only publish the craziest of the crazy. I bet we would win an award. I bet we would win an award of some sort. It'd be amazing.
Made,
and then there'd be an expose in the New York Times.
And I think one of the amazing things, and one of the things I really like about Kohol, that the emphasis is so much on that process and the creating that space and mentorship. And if you have a good idea, Kohol will
I did add it to the Discord. I did
to make sure that you'll be published, instead of putting you down because
nothing could go wrong with my plan. It is completely foolproof.
Framework, and I think that's really important, because we don't have many spaces that are so welcoming. And
yes, we can also create our own awards body,
and you described
we should definitely do that
well in that workshop. Maybe a follow-up question to both of you, Riva and Sabiha, which is, I mean, you mentioned it in different ways, but I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit more on the...
So what's going to happen though is here's what's going to happen. So in my locals community, if you're a supporter, you get access to the supporter Discord. We have a channel on the supporter Discord where we scheme ideas like this. We got a whole bunch of ideas that are being schemed right now. Okay. What's going to happen is we're going to put this idea in practice. We're going to go through all the trouble of creating our own academic journal and doing everything right. And my one effing Twitter troll, who I know is watching this right now, is going to remember. And that Twitter troll is going to ruin everything. Because they're obsessed with me. Because I live rent-free in their head. What a sad, sad life.
Relationship between praxis, activism, and theory when it comes to, queer studies and activism. Riva, you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah,
I don't even know what
I've
the
been
question
thinking
was.
about this a lot because I think it's at the center of what
Oh,
we do in terms of,
patriarchy is gone again.
writing ourselves back in as affect. And I think it's really hard to pinpoint, what that praxis looks like, because putting it into words feels a bit like putting it in a box, like making it legible and therefore consumable. But linking to what you just said, Nadia, about the processes, what I will try to do here is to break down processes, because it's always confusing. Like, what is Kuhul, for example? Is it an activist journal? Is it an academic journal? It's really unclear. And
Her
I think the
journal is
lines are
having an
blurry.
identity crisis.
But I think that the dichotomy no longer is no longer there when we think of how is it that we work.
Tony, I'm not displaying that on the screen, but dude, okay.
Through those processes as praxis. So first, maybe thinking about the many locations of our activism and praxis as places and spaces where we spill into. So as Aya said at the launch event, from workshop to revolution to drag shows, and that Sabiha pointed
Wait. Did you guys hear that? She's talking about like the places that her journal spills into, and she says, I swear to God, this is what I heard. From workshop to revolution to drag shows. This is about activism in the Middle East. Activism in the Middle East. I'm just going to rewind that real quick because I'm pretty sure that's what I heard, but I just want to make positive. Make positive. That's definitely a good saying.
No longer is no longer there when we think of how is it that we work through those processes as praxis. So first, maybe thinking about the many locations of our activism and praxis as places and spaces where we spill into. So as Aya said at the launch event, from workshop to revolution to drag shows, and that Sabiha pointed to early just now.
Wow.
And this way of, spilling into space, of occupying space is part of, not being isolated in one category or one way of doing things or one context. Another process that we do is this work of sitting circles. We're writing, like I don't understand why writing always has to be seen as this kind of individualistic endeavor.
Someone make that Venn diagram, put it in Discord,
the writing,
please.
Processes that you described, Nadia. So maybe the idea is to create queer tables, even writing circles that are virtual with the pandemic conditions that we are living under right now. So by creating queer tables, what we can do is then really think about knowledge that's collaborative, maybe not in the product, but how is it that we get there? And this thinking together, this togetherness, I call it a work of shaking. So shaking is affect, but also shaking worlds. And because of this shaking, this affect, this writing ourselves back in, theory in the flesh means exactly that. Theory becomes activism, becomes a site where work can happen, as is apparent in
theory becomes activism. Like maybe we should watch more queer studies stuff because okay, I don't like queer studies in that it takes them half an hour to get to everything. But I do like queer studies in that they're much less careful. Here's what I think. Here's my theory. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. They are much less careful about saying the quiet part out loud. Like critical race theory right now has such a big spotlight on it that I think they're really trying to be much more careful about, like they used to say crazy stuff like 5 years ago. If we watch a critical race theory training from like 5 years ago, they're going to say lots of like the canoe meeting from Evergreen State College. Like they're going to say all sorts of crazy nonsense because they've got to, but like that was before the big spotlight got put on them, right? And now they're like, you don't even know what the definition is. We don't have time to educate you. Like they're not saying anything, right? But queer studies isn't there yet. So queer studies seems to still be saying like the quiet part out loud, like she just did. That this is about putting theory into practice. or excuse me, about taking theory to activism. That's what she said. I should write down a timestamp on this. 26.
His issue on queer feminisms. And another process is work that is uncomfortable, because I don't want to romanticize, those spaces and those ways of doing. It is community work. So it's a work that requires us to fail at times, so we can better imagine ways of togetherness that are not based on, the systems we have been criticizing and want to do away with, that are carceral, that are, driven by police logic, the master's tools.
Wait. Systems that we want to do away with that are driven by police logic, the master's tools. You guys catch that? She says systems that we want to do away with, driven by police logic, the master's tools. Let's listen again. I know I rewind a lot, but I think it's important to really, we have to be able to identify when they're saying the really crazy shit, okay? Oh shoot, hang on.
Togetherness that are not based on, the systems we have been criticizing and want to do away with, that are carceral, that are, driven by police logic, the master's tools. So it's work that not only undoes binaries, but, to borrow from and be inspired by Keguro Macharia, that wanders away. So it's not about East and West. It's not about theory and activism. It's not
because he's a women's studies professor.
So easy to
That's why he's quiet. He's a women's
with,
studies
with
professor as a
that.
man.
But then when do we do what we really want to do? When do we have space for this work? So writing ourselves back in is writing as doing, writing as praxis. And queerness as a practice of world making, to think of those binaries that, we wander off
Wow.
from. So queerness as a practice of world making that we do is something that we do, not something we respond to, basically.
Queerness is not something that we do. It's something that we respond to.
Yeah, thanks so much, Riva. Sabiha, would you like to also add something?
It's very difficult to add these beautiful words, but I really want to insist on, this idea of when you are, when we're tackling embodied knowledge, when we're tackling embodied violence,
the man is never going to speak.
Every word we write is collaborative.
They're undoing the patriarchy. The man is never going to speak.
On somebody's lived experience, on somebody's past violences. There are traces, right, of the flesh in it, in all this theorizing. And theorizing can be absolutely pedagogical, right? It can give you the tools to find the words, to express yourself, to do it. And I agree with everything that Riwa said. So this is what we do, right? Maybe on the side, but I find myself increasingly in my work at the university, when you transform all this theory or all this theorizing, when you write yourself back in, really what you're doing is, I don't even know if it's writing yourself back in. It's rediscovering yourself, and it gives you a lot of confidence and self-assertion to do certain things. And now I use myself, for example, today I find myself using my power position in the university to deal with a lot of the...
I find myself using my power or position at the university, because power is what they care about.
Injustices, I would say, epistemic injustices I used to not know how to deal with in my inbox.
She's dealing with systemic injustices in her inbox? I have over 100,000 unread emails in my inbox right now. Do I have systemic injustice in my inbox? Most of them is just stuff I just don't bother to open. That's not worth opening. I don't actually have 100,000 unread. Well, I do, but not real emails. Hang on, let's listen to that again.
In the university to deal with a lot of the injustices, I would say epistemic injustices I used to not know how to deal with in my inbox. You know, people who want my free labor, my contacts, my networks, my expertise. Okay, who are you
I feel very oppressed at having 100,000 unread emails in my inbox. All those people want my emotional labor.
collaborating with from the region? Where are the research projects that go to speak to these activists? What is the grassroots works that you're doing? Where is the praxism you're doing? Nothing, nada. We're just theorizing, you know, and we need your contacts. I do it with graduate students, PhD applicants. Is their positionality clear? Am I receiving another proposal about saving women, about saving gays? Because nobody needs saving. And this is why we
Right
need
about that
these
last bit.
strong right spaces of collaborative work, of writing circles, you know, whatever it is. I do it the same also with the peer reviewers. Like, you know, when I'm asked to review for journals, where are the gaps in race? Where are the gaps in ethnicity? Where is the praxis? All this talking about intersectionality. Where is the praxis?
Intersectionality,
And,
ding, 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 ding. Bingo
so yeah,
word.
that's all I can add, really. All the rest pretty much has been very succinctly said by Riwa.
Thank you. I'd like to now turn to Rassan, to you and your book.
Oh, good.
Which
The
I
man is
already showed
speaking.
before. If you haven't seen it, so I recently read it, and the book. So I guess the sort of the main aim of the book, the way I see it, is that it very much challenges how sexuality has been used to provide this exceptional narrative about particularly contemporary Beirut and about modernity and modern Beirut. And your book, Rassan, offers an alternative to this neoliberal narrative of, well, Lebanese, but actually more specifically Beiruti exceptionalism, right? And it
Baruti
highlights
exceptionalism.
also very succinctly the power of everyday disruptive situations. And when I say everyday disruptive situations, I mean, the book was written before the recent state of big disruptions, multiple disruptions, and how these disruptive situations shape LGBTQ life. So at the heart of your book, as I understand it, is the unsettling of the assumption that the normal is normative. And so while you focus on Beirut, you describe a situation, Al-Wad, that consists
Okay.
of
Hang
a
on.
constant series
I
of.
want to explain what they just said. Okay, for people, and again, I know I have a lot. Most of you guys are regulars today, but she just said like the premise of his book is like the normative is normal. That's not. That's something that they made up, right? So the basic premise of all of this is that they believe that whatever the dominant thing is in society, whether that be white or male, whatever they deem dominant, they call that the norm, the normal. Now, is it maybe on, if we're thinking about like, a standard deviation, like whatever, maybe, but they use it to mean that everyone else that is outside that normal is somehow oppressed or doesn't have power in the situation, which is provably untrue across the board. These are the people that are perpetuating stereotypes in our society. And they're doing that by saying, these people are normal. This is what it means to be normal. That's all coming from critical theory. The stereotypes are being perpetuated by critical theory.
Of disruptions, the lack of normality as an everyday context due to conflict, violence, economic crisis, political corruption, sectarianism, and so on. And based on the very in-depth research that you did, you're exploring queer tactics in this continued state of disruption. And you're challenging these binaries of coming out and being in the closet. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the queer tactics that are at the heart of your book.
The queer tactics.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Thank you for this generous reading and for your questions. And thank you again for inviting us and for making this possible, and to everybody at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. And it's such a pleasure and honor to be in the company of people I really look up to and the work, the transformative work that they're doing. So thank you. So to actually I'll pick up your question from where I think Rewa started. And my book, what I attempted to do with the book before I talk about the queer tactics and why queer tactics become central is kind of demonstrate that it's not another study on gay life or gay Beirut. That's not what I was trying to do, which is not what Euro American readers want to read, because what sells is a book with queer people holding hands, so I was trying to resist that, to say that actually my analysis is the queer strategies that come from
I want to
something that
resist
I've
capitalism by
embodied
writing
and
a book that doesn't
experienced,
sell.
which I did not come up with the term al-wada, but I'm going to explicate al-wada a little bit and kind of explain why the Beirut explosion is not just another manifestation of al-wada. So the book briefly just examines queer life, but not necessarily linked to LGBT life. So I kind of make a distinction between a
What is
queer
the difference?
situation that becomes normalized. And that's, I think, Nadia's, your question about
Wait,
the
wait,
normative
wait,
versus
wait,
the
wait, wait,
normative.
wait, 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 wait. Is he implying that queer is just code for anything that's not normal? And normal, remember, by their definition, is like the dominant culture. This is like when, you know what this is like? Very early on in my red pill journey, I learned that I could be queer as a straight woman because I didn't subscribe to the traditional feminine stereotypes. So even though I was perfectly straight, I could still be queer. This is what this is. Looks like Laura got a bingo in the chat. Congratulations, Laura. Right on, girl. Now we're going for blackout bingo, folks. But this is what this is like. They're basically saying that anything outside of, so I am considered queer. Every woman in this chat is considered queer. Everyone who is non-white is considered queer. Everyone who has different abilities is considered queer. Congratulations. I'm pretty sure that everyone in the chat, in some respect or another, actually now qualifies as queer. Congratulations to all of us. We all made it, guys. We're all oppressed.
Is what happens when the non-normative becomes the normative state of life. That's where I begin my question, and that's where I kind of end. Another thing that I do is though I employ queer theory and queer of color critique, I also show their failures. And my entry point with it was that queer theory cannot account to what's happening in Beirut, because it always
I'm
assumes
trying,
a
man. I'm
normative that we need
trying.
to
I'm
disrupt.
trying very
So
hard.
my
I'm working
question at
very
the heart of the
hard.
book is what happens when, instead of just applying queer theoretical notions, so I disidentify, in the words of Munoz, from queer theory and queer of color critique, and find an entryway to say that what is the role of queer theory or queer activism, again, when we're trying to shake up or upset the status quo or disrupt, when disruption is what is normative. So that's kind of where my entry point is. And to be very honest, the book is a product of what Riwa was talking about, of what I saw as failures in my own research. Everything that I thought should not go into the dissertation, everything that I thought I was failing, I was being re-traumatized by so I did the research mostly in 2013, 14, during every Eisen suicide bombing. Can I actually do this research? Ethnographers are supposed to go do the heroic masculinist kind of white assumption of it, and I wasn't
heroic
that person.
masculine and white
So
assumption.
Everything that I considered to be a failure was what I made into the book. So the queer tactics, just a few more words about al-wada. So al-wada is the Arabic equivalent for the word situation, and it can only be understood by people who live al-wada. Al-wada, Riwa would kind of understand exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's a condition, or it's a nebulous
These people
term.
are literally,
it's just the
okay.
situation. There's no connotation with
I
it.
don't know how much more of this I can take. In theory, there's another hour of this, but these people are like they're not saying anything. They're not saying anything. We've suffered through a half hour of this so far, and they're not teaching anything. They're not saying anything. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let it play a little bit. We're going to keep listening, but I'm just going to do a quick search and see. I should always have a backup. I should know by now to have a backup just in case this goes horribly, horribly wrong, because they aren't saying anything. I know we could hit gold at any minute. I'm going to let it play a little bit longer. I'm just going to do some quick Google searching. If you guys have any suggestions of things that we should watch that are crazy, let me know. I just don't know if I can sit through another hour of this because they aren't saying anything. Yeah, that one lady complained about being oppressed by her emails. I am also oppressed by my emails. There is systemic oppression in my inbox. I don't know how to manage it. All right, let's keep going.
Whether it's positive or negative. So unlike thinking about words like conflict, or words, if we think about Northern Ireland, the troubles, al-wada is neutral. But al-wada, similarly to al-ahdath, which is the civil war, the events. What happens? What does al-wada do? So al-wada for me is the situation that is always disruptive. So the title fails me a little bit, but I had to come up with a title that can sell. So al-wada is always disruptive. There isn't a time when al-wada is not disruptive in the context of Beirut and Lebanon, actually. It has no clear beginning, has no clear end. It continues its shape-shifting, it takes on different forms, but the only consistent thing about it is that it's always ever present and shapes our lives. So the period when I was doing the research, marked by a series of political deadlocks, more corruption, garbage crisis. I can go on and on. But the port explosion and what's happening in Beirut now in Lebanon, sorry, I have to not just, the book is about
Okay.
Beirut.
I might have an alternative, guys. I might have an alternative. Okay. I have two. Oh, God. We might have as many as two alternatives. And I want to show you guys. We're going to do a vote. Okay. We're going to do a vote. We can keep watching this. That's okay. We can do that. Or let's see. I have two possible contenders. I have The Whiteness of Human Rights, Queer Women of Color, and the Horizon of Humanity from the University of Hartford. Or I have Decentering Whiteness in Queerness from Out Youth. The mainstream queer narrative in the West is consistently centers whiteness and exclude the experiences of communities of color. We could do either of these. So do we want to do The Whiteness of Human Rights, Queer Women of Color? Or do we want to do Decentering Whiteness and Queerness? Or do we want to keep watching the Middle Eastern Studies thing? What do you guys think? I kind of want to do, I don't want to ruin it. Vote for whatever you want. But I kind of want to do Decentering Whiteness and Queerness myself. I feel like there could be gold in that. I just do. I feel like there could be gold. But The Whiteness of Human Rights, Queer Women of Color, and the Horizon of Humanity could also have gold, if we're being fair about it. What do you guys think? I just have a good feeling about Decentering Whiteness and Queerness. I have a good feeling. Yeah, Patrice says Decentering Whiteness and Queerness. Kieran says I agree. I'm gonna assume that means he agrees with me. Reagan says Decentering. Note 86, can I give a vote to a marginalized voice? All right, let's do this Decentering Whiteness and Queerness thing. Hang on, I gotta set it up. Stop share. Okay, we're putting it back in Chrome. I need to have it. Okay. We're gonna go to hell for watching this and making fun of it. Just so you guys know, we're all officially going to hell. All right, let's do it.
We are super grateful to have you here on the 65th anniversary.
And as a reminder, I know that was a little bit slow for the first hour of the stream, but mount that like button, guys. I try to bring you interesting stuff. Sometimes it's a reaction video. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's boring. But I feel like we're about to hit gold. So just hang in there, guys. Grab another drink. Mount that like button. Subscribe to my second channel if you haven't already. I appreciate it.
Of the lynching of Emmett Till. We're
Oh,
here
good.
tonight for a conversation on decentering whiteness and queerness. Our original moderator, the founder of Q Plus EDU, E. Smith, is just starting school at Harvard this fall as a freshman and is unable to make it in to moderate as planned for this evening, so I will be stepping in to do that. My name is Frederick, my pronouns are they, them, and I am Out Youth Texas Gender and Sexuality Alliance Network Coordinator. So with that,
did everyone catch their name? This is gonna be gold. Everything happens for a reason. This is gonna be gold.
Kick it over to the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Ina. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Health and Wellness Coordinator at Algo, and I don't know what else I should say. I was born in India. I was raised in Southwest Houston in Missouri City, and I've been in Austin for about 7 years.
It all
now.
comes back to Austin every time.
Jaden?
Yeah, I can go next. I'm Jaden. My pronouns are they, them.
Trans.
I am a third-year PhD student at UT in the Black Studies department, and I study prison abolition.
Prison
other notable things about
abolition.
me, I was born in San Antonio. Both sides of my family
Prison
are
abolition.
Texans. So I am very much have Texas running through my blood. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So for my first 18 or so years, I was there, and I spent college in St. Louis, and that's sort of where I got my political education.
Hey y'all, my name's Haran Kidane. My pronouns are she and her, and I am currently working with public health students. I just recently graduated in public health and social work, so yeah, excited to be done with that. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. I'm from Dallas originally, been here in Austin for a while now. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and get a chance to talk with my friends and get to share some thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So let's jump right in. So you can popcorn this, whoever wants to go first.
Popcorn?
Can you talk about the origins of mainstream American queer culture?
No one wants to take it.
Honestly, I don't really know what the origins of mainstream American queer culture is, other than
It's already bodes well.
Like co-opting from Black and brown folks. I don't think I'm not quite sure what mainstream.
The origins of mainstream queer culture in America co-op from Black and brown folks. All right.
Means. But I feel like a lot of it, has come from the sort of.
Okay. I want us to do a quick pause. These are all obviously very young people. So what we need to make the assumption of here, so I don't quite feel like I'm going to hell, I'm not making fun of these kids. They may be adults. They're probably adults. I'm sure they're adults. I'm not making fun of these young adults. Every point of mockery in the rest of this broadcast, I am making fun of the university professors who have taught these impressionable, young, not fully developed logic function of their brain people of all genders and no gender. I'm making fun of the professors who have put these ideas in their head, because every single idea that we are going to hear from these four people are not ideas that have come from them. They are ideas from people who are far older than them, who should know far better than them, who were entrusted to teach them and instead brainwashed them into nonsense. So at every point, I'm not making fun of them. Not making fun of them. I feel really badly for them that they have been put through the education system that they have. It is not their fault. It is their professor's fault. It is the adults' fault, the people with the fully developed logic functions of their brains. So that is who we are making fun of, not the children or the young people of all genders and no gender. We are making fun of the adults that taught them, all right? Now I feel like I'm not going to hell, even though I don't believe that hell exists, but you guys know.
Cultures that, Black and Latinx communities had to make because of the violence they experienced because of who they were as queer and trans folks. So I feel like a lot of that was around, like how can we create a sense of home?
Let me just put a really fine point on it. Every single thing that we are going to hear from them in the course of this little seminar, this is what they've learned in college. They have learned this in college. Apparently at college in Texas, apparently at UT, which is a publicly funded university. They have learned everything they're about to tell us in college. Let's just keep that in mind.
A sense of belonging.
Paid for by the taxpayer, partially.
I think a lot of what we see today, like drag culture and
drag
voguing
culture,
and what we saw even back in the day, right? Of like white folks making voguing a thing or whatever has come
voguing
from
is cultural
the work
appropriation
that these Black and Latinx, trans and queer folks have done.
Yeah, I mean, Ina really sort of succinctly answered pretty well. Yeah, I would agree that if we're thinking about mainstream in terms of like Glee, that's like my gay era would be Glee.
Glee as queer culture. I did used to enjoy Glee. I did. I have to admit, I did enjoy Glee when it first came on. I did.
Thinking about Glee or Pose or any of the number of sort of mediated depictions of queer and transness in recent history have been co-optations, really, of Black culture specifically.
Glee co-opted. Wait. You're making the argument that Glee co-opted Black culture? How? How did a cheesy show about a Glee club in high school co-opt Black culture? I want answers. I want a specific example.
Community.
I just poured my second beer, by the way.
Thinking about houses and how like houses were formed, not were formed because people were in danger and people needed ways to survive. And that came from building intra-communally rather than inter-communally. But I'm also thinking way before sort of the dawn of houses and ball culture.
Did he just argue that like single family homes are antithetical to community? I'm pretty sure he did. Because they're collectivists, because that's what they learned in college.
To like the ways that Black, trans, and gender non-conforming people, at least that's what we would call them today, formed communities in like jazz clubs and speakeasies and sort of there's always been an underground, particularly in the West, an underground.
Are they arguing that speakeasies were co-opted from Black and brown culture? Who knows where speakeasies came from? Who knows why speakeasies were a thing? Chat it in. Let's teach these kids some history.
Sort of Black, queer, and trans community and spaces for folks to express themselves, particularly when sort of very...
Speakeasies were not places for Black and trans people to express themselves. That's not what they were. That was not the purpose of a speakeasy. It was not for Black and trans people to express themselves. Who knows what a speakeasy was for? Oh my God.
Clearly, Black expressions of Black, queer, and transness were criminalized. Not that they aren't now, but more explicit.
Speakeasies were because of prohibition, when alcohol was criminalized, not Black trans queerness. Black trans queerness was not criminalized. Alcohol was criminalized. That was the purpose of a speakeasy. My God.
Explicitly criminalized than they are now.
And speakeasies are awesome, by the way.
I think a lot of what y'all were saying, and
even now,
what you also made me think of a little bit more. Like, and also I'll admit that I'm still learning, and I'm a lifelong learner about the history and the stories and things that need to be shared. And when thinking of mainstream, not only co-opting, but erasure of a lot of, and how white supremacy and whiteness played into that erasure, and what decided to be mainstream, and co-opting it when they decided to co-opt, because of, like, you know, that kind of two sides of it. It's either erased and eliminated from the conversation in order to define what is the mainstream, or it is taken and co-opted to then.
You're
define
literally in the
mainstream.
conversation
So
right now.
It
You're
seems to be a
literally
lot
in the
of those things,
conversation.
but the origins of it, I know, and if you dig down to the root of it, at least in like
literally
America and the like, not like the land that was here before queerness existed, like longer than I could even imagine, and that's not discussed in the mainstream. Why isn't that? And I can only say that it's because of white supremacy deciding what the mainstream narrative is, and that kind of either co-opting or erasure. But yeah, and I'm trying to explore more of the origins, not just the mainstream side of it, but just those stories that weren't told, weren't able to be captured, or weren't able to be shared because of what was stolen, because of what was taken and erased. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think, yeah, it's really important to remember that all of the indigenous native folks who were here before colonization had their own understanding
ding, ding, ding.
of what gender and sexuality and sexual orientation meant for them. And many of those cultures that were here across the continent had third and fourth genders, and understood people who were not, you know, in the binary to
wow.
be healers and, you know, shamans, and really culturally significant and important. And I think that you're absolutely right. That's something that the, you know, mainstream just completely erases, you know, that white supremacy has just said, you know, that our American culture is not about those things. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Also thinking historically about how the queer community has seemed to value a sense of like difference or deviance. And now it seems like there's this desire to be more like homogenous, more palatable, less flaming, and more like white dominated in regard to what queerness is. Can y'all speak to some of your thoughts on that?
I can start first this go around. Yeah, so I would say, like, when I was first coming out, like almost 10 years ago at this point, Lord, it's been a while. When I was first coming out, there were on YouTube, Dan Savage and his partner created this sort of campaign called It Gets Better. And that was sort of my introduction into what it meant to be queer, that though we were somehow different, we were basically the same. We just loved differently. And that was the narrative that I was sort of fed. And I think that that narrative certainly does not rest on the shoulders of Dan Savage, but is part of a larger conversation about how national nonprofits, in particular the Human Rights Campaign, molded queer political agendas for a long time and continue
Indeed.
to mold those agendas.
Yes, young
those
child.
agendas,
Oh, F. This channel does need mods, Patrice. You're right.
about marriage equality.
I
So,
forgot. I'll upgrade you guys. Some of you guys
to
to
that
mods.
idea is that
I forgot I wasn't on my other channel.
that we as queer people are entitled to the same rights as straight people, and therefore we should be able to enter into heteronormativity in the same way that cis straight people.
If you want to be a mod and you're a member of my locals, just chat in. I know who you guys are.
What that does,
I'll make
at
you a
least
mod.
what that did for me, was like caused me to not experiment with my queerness and also my gender for a really long time, because I sort of thought that there's one way to be queer and trans, or there's one way to be queer,
Reagan.
and that is to not be trans. And yeah, it's really harmful. And because of the push towards marriage equality, issues around like Black incarcerated people or Black queer and trans people, Black gender nonconforming people in general, fell by the wayside. And now sort of more
Benjamin, I gotcha.
national nonprofits are having conversations that folks have been having for a very long time, but are now entering into those conversations and trying to do advocacy work. But it seems, yeah, like the nonprofit industrial complex failed us and continues to fail us in trying to tell us that we need to assimilate into the white hetero definition of what it means to be a person.
Metastep, remind me back on my main channel too when we get there.
We're
eventually.
Queer and like that is different than you, and like I don't care that that makes you feel some type of way. I think that there's a lot of value to
all
saying,
right,
like,
Junior.
We're different.
All right,
and
hang on. Just because something is different and just because you are coming into your own does not mean you actually make people feel uncomfortable. But what these people do, like what these kids do, and people who embrace like this is like, wow, Laura, first time here. Carolyn watching from. I'm sorry you're in Canada, Laura. I hope you're doing well. You're not in teen jail or something. No, but like these kids, like they take it, it's like it's the rebellious stage that I think most of us go through when we're kids, right? Which is like it's cool to be different. It's cool to be outside the mainstream. And I'm not questioning this person's identity. Like they can present however they want to present. They can use whatever name, whatever pronouns they want. I don't really care. I don't care what they put in their body. They are apparently above the age of 18. So they can do whatever they want with their lives and the consequences are theirs. But it's like it really does bother me how going through a rebellious stage in your life has now means making medical decisions that could have a permanent impact on like your ability to have kids, that could result in actual surgery. Like it's just absolutely absurd. Like I went through a rebellious stage, and to some extent I'm still in a rebellious stage, but I didn't have surgery. I didn't go on medication. Like it just boggles my mind. But what I'm trying to say is like they get off on it. They get like, I'm different and you're just gonna have to accept it. Well, okay, fine. Congratulations. You are a unique and beautiful snowflake.
Care really if I was born this way, if I chose this, if I was socialized into this. I don't care about any of those questions.
Well, by your own theory, you can't be socialized
that, like,
into
my
it.
people
So
are dying, and
your people, they're not your
and
people.
these
They're
sort of,
just
like,
people.
large queer
They're not
nonprofits
yours.
are not helping to curb that at all.
Oh, he doesn't like the Human Rights Campaign, huh? He or they. I'm sorry, I forget their pronouns. I should probably use they.
I just feel so much of what Jaden just said, and like the word queer. Like when I first really came across the word queer, it was in a book by Vivek Bald, which some of you may have heard or not heard. It's called The Bengali Harlem, and it's about and I'm Bengali, and so I was like, oh, I really want to read this. And it was he studied the migration patterns of like Bangladeshi and Bengali immigrants who came to the East Coast, but particularly New York, and they started creating communities with Black, Puerto Rican, Latinx communities within the New York boroughs, and started having families and children. Like they had families back home.
Someone's gonna get a blackout bingo today.
This is beautiful.
I have a good
so
feeling.
I really recommend it. I'll write it in here.
I have a very good feeling that someone's gonna get blackout bingo. Let us keep track of it, guys. This is a good opportunity. This is like probably the best opportunity we've had in a while to get blackout bingo. They've said so many bingo words already, and we're only 13 minutes into the discussion.
Folks want to look it up, but yeah, I actually, and Vivek Bald is a son of that history, and the word queer actually came up in one of the like excerpts that he had shared with the reader in his book a long time ago. This white, like real colonial white person was like, saw a Bangladeshi or Bengali man like biking down the street. He was like, oh, this queer dark-skinned man was biking down the street. And I was like, wow, I never actually heard somebody use the word queer to someone, like other than their sexual orientation. And I actually like Googled and was like, what does the word queer mean? And, you know, in Bengali, we would say adbut, which means strange or different. And, you know, that's really essentially like, I feel like that's really the crux of like my own ideas of belonging and ideas of like being a queer person of color. Like my person of colorness is queer, you know, and like being a person of color is queer in a world where whiteness or being white is seen as like the norm and the thing to deviate from. So it's like automatically as a person of color, I'm already a deviant person. Like I'm already queer. And
as a person of color, see, this is the same thing that they were saying in that other one, right? As a person of color, I am already a deviant person. I am already queer. So they're saying that anything outside the norm or the dominant culture is considered queer in their ideology. So again, I have to congratulate pretty much everyone in the chat in one respect or another. If you have something like a repressive trait, any trait, you could have ADHD, you could be depressed, be missing a leg, you could be a woman, you could be non-white, you could be, I mean, Joshua thinks everyone is bisexual, and I actually don't disagree with him on that. So, like, I mean, conceivably, like, every single person could be queer. Congratulations. We're all queer now.
So I just feel like that's something like Jaden brought up. I was like, yes, that's I resonate with that. And I just feel like, you know, we've always, as people of color, felt different, had a sense of difference because of these really horrible, violent, like binaries that colonizers have set, these institutions have set for us. And we've had to mold ourselves to that in really horrible, like harmful ways. And I just don't think of it as like a historically versus present. I feel like that's always happened. Like it's always been a fight for diversity, for beauty, for inclusion, for celebrating our differences versus like this really homogenous, like, you know, nationalism, homo nationalism that like white folks have kind of brought onto us in these real institutional ways. So it just never has felt like, oh, this is something that's happening now. Like we're now feeling like it's a white dominated narrative when we've kind of been feeling that for centuries now, really.
Yeah, I think, and like to echo, I guess, what everybody's saying, and also now that I'm thinking about it more and more, and like not only to think about how the narrative has been dominated by whiteness, but also the other intersection. So I'm thinking of like body size, and when you think of like when people are depicting like queer communities, like what body sizes are they often talking about it? What accessibility are they often talking about it? What class? So, and that's all being furthered by white supremacy, like why. So thinking of all that, and that homogenous of saying like they're like no body size, you know, no fats, no nothing like that, you know, and thinking of fat as a bad thing. And so just thinking of those different things and how it's homogenous in trying to be homogenous, because it's the other side of it for me. I feel like
she's like getting all her buzzwords in there. She like got every buzzword in there within like
in that
a minute and a half.
When I learned about myself and my queerness was through Black and brown spaces that were like, that wasn't even like a, like, you know, a thought, I guess, if that makes sense. And so even by saying sometimes that it's because my narrative wasn't white dominated, at least what I was learning through and who I was inspired by and who I was, you know, laughing with and learning with and all that good stuff. But I don't want to also ignore the fact that there is a homogenous white dominated narrative trying to be pushed. So it's like that's again part of that two-sided thing, like acknowledging that it's trying to be pushed and it's there and it's something that needs to be challenged and addressed. But at the same time, holding space, acknowledging those spaces and those narratives that are dominating for a lot of folks, for some folks, and you know, it's really a beautiful experience to be in. And so just thinking of that a little bit more, that's kind of where my head's at.
I love that. I love, like, I'm grateful for the reminder that like just because this is what's presented as what is the homogenous like queer experience, like that there's always pushback against that and the white supremacy and all those things. Jaden, your comment about the nonprofit industrial complex and all of like queer individuals and like queer like small nonprofit organizations trying to fit into this like into the mold of what the big nonprofits want us to be, as far as like you will be this cis het, you know, like almost clone of what we want. You just happen to be gay. I think that
gay is
really
no,
nicely
hang on,
into the
hang
next
on.
question. I want to
hang on before we get into that. So you notice she basically said like you're like if you're cis like so you basically just like happen to be a gay version of like what they already want. So in the land of critical theory, gay men aren't really considered to be oppressed any longer. They aren't. Gay men are not oppressed. This is why so many men, well, my theory anyway, this is why so many gay men actually like ended up voting for Trump. I believe that was like the largest LGBT demographic. It was like gay men were like pretty like okay with Trump, like by and large, I mean, especially proportional. Because gay men are no longer considered oppressed under critical theory. Because it's all about trans and non-binary. I mean, they're basically trying to eliminate lesbians. Lesbians don't even exist so far as they're concerned. So that's why she said that, is that gay men are no longer considered oppressed because they're men and mostly white. So they don't count.
Respectability politics. So for each of you, if you could tell us how your racial identity intersects with your queer identity, and how your expressions of yourself in regards to your race and your gender impact how you navigate the world.
No one.
You can start. I'm still thinking about it because this is how I feel. I don't want to curse.
That's how you feel.
But I'm just gonna say I'm not a fan of respectability politics. And since I heard about it, I'm just like, my gosh, how awful, like to try to limit somebody, like, I don't know, like somebody who's supposed to, like, we're a collective, not a collective, because everybody has their unique experience, but there's a collective struggle happening to fight.
You know, she had to correct herself. She basically just like she started to insinuate like we are all a team. We are all the same, right? We are a collective. And then she's like, no, people have their individual experience, but no, we are a collective. What they're trying to do is peer pressure people into acting as part of the collective rather than thinking for themselves and deciding for themselves and not playing identity politics.
For it, to think that like folks are policing others based off of using another form of oppression to police somebody as they're fighting for oppression that's impacting us all. That's like, to me, it's like ridiculous.
You cannot
like
think differently than us.
You're a Black woman. I get mad a lot, and I feel like I have every right to be mad. And so when people,
I have every
mad,
right to
I'm
hate
like,
people who disagree with me.
So to me, it's just unfathomable that it's happening, but I know it is, and so just I don't know. I feel like also being a Black woman, I've like seen.
She is the most oppressed of the whole panel.
By friends and people who love me as I am, to a point where I'm like, my gosh, like this kind of feeling of being true to yourself, but also knowing that folks are with you in that, and they.
So the order of oppression on this panel, I think, is her starting because she is a queer Black woman. I don't know how she's queer exactly, but she said she was, so she's probably at the top. Next up, we probably have him, and only because he's a man, because he's obviously trans, and so he's pretty high ranking as well. And next up, we have her for oppression because she's you know, an immigrant. She's a woman. She's very not white. And then we have the white lady. So the white lady is the oppressor on this panel, which is probably why she's not saying anything. She's just listening. She's not going to interject because she is giving space and centering all of the queer voices of color on the panel. That's how this works.
They're like, I don't know, it's just like something so beautiful and worth fighting for and worth being mad about when folks can't get that. And when folks aren't allowed access to that because of, you know, policing, like, you know, spaces that are supposed to be queer friendly, but folks are still being transphobic, folks are still being racist and anti-Black. You know, folks are
What does
still
that
saying
mean?
like, why are you mad about, you know, like, you know, like, why are you thinking about that so hard? So it's like, to me, it's valid beyond expression at the same time, because I've seen what it could be like for everybody. I don't know, I see what that love could be like for folks, and they deserve that. And I feel like trying to respect or police how folks present or fight for that is ridiculous and shouldn't be used to continue the oppression that we're trying to fight against.
Yeah, I'll say that I feel like, you know, our at least for me, like my racial and my queer identity have always been one and the same, and like I never felt like, I don't know, I never felt like one or the other, like, or never felt like I was betraying my, like, you know, South Asian community by being queer. It always felt like, you know, there are queer South Asian people out there, you know, it's part of our history. We've always been here, and they'll find me, and like I'm part of that community, and they'll find me whenever. So that's always how I felt, and I grew up in an extremely diverse district. I grew up in Fort Bend, which is like, I think, the diverse district in the country. So I had like a lot of South Asian people around, you know, a lot of West African folks around, a lot of African American communities and Latinx communities. I mean, it was just extremely diverse. And for me, I just always knew like this is where I feel at home. I feel at home with people of color, and like even if they are straight people of color, I'm okay with that as long as, you know, it's a safe place for me. That's okay. Like I would rather be in straight POC spaces, honestly, than be in queer white spaces, which can be really violent sometimes. And actually didn't really.
You guys hear that? I'd rather be in straight POC places than queer white places, because queer white places can be violent. What did I just say? Gay men are no longer considered oppressed.
Experience queer white spaces until I came to Austin, and it felt like, you know, there was no food, which I was like, where's the food? Are we not eating today?
What are you talking about?
And there was always like alcohol, which was also really weird, you know, and I'm Asian. I feel like most Asians are allergic to alcohol, and like I just couldn't do it. I'm like, this is not my place. So just like from the get-go, you know, like from the jump, I was like, peace, like this is not me.
Wait. Hang
Hang
on. Are young people like not, are the woke not drinking? This would explain everything, wouldn't it? I'm honestly asking. I never thought about this before. Are the woke not drinking? Are they? Because they're all kind of laughing. They're not. See, this is the problem. These kids need to lighten the F up. They need to go and drink. They need to go and have ill-considered, though safe sex with many people. They need to lighten up. They need to smoke a lot of weed. They need to drink. They need to go be debaucherous in their youth, because that's the time you're supposed to be debaucherous in completely safe ways. This is the problem. This is what's going on. They're oppressing themselves, and by virtue of oppressing themselves, they're oppressing all the rest of us in the process. Wow, I had never considered this. They don't drink. Is this really a thing? Oh my God.
Color space as well as queer people of color spaces. Like there's always food, you know, someone's always cooking, someone's always bringing food. And it's just like, I'm just very grateful that like in Austin, I could find that place. Just like how I had those spaces in Houston and the suburbs. But that's how it is for me, at least. And like I feel like if like my trans, you know, Black and Indigenous folks can't get in the room.
And by the way, I don't think that there's, like, just so we're clear, I don't think that there's anything wrong with not drinking and not doing drugs and like all this. If that's your choice, that's your choice. I'm just saying that in college is the time to do this. And if you're going to do it, it's time to do it in college. That is the purpose of college. You're not actually learning anything. We can see very clearly that they're not learning anything in college. The purpose of college is to like screw around for 4 years or however long you happen to be in college. I don't think there's anything wrong with not drinking or doing drugs or any of those things. I'm just saying that at some point, if you don't, like, they're too stressed out. Yes, Patrice has hit up, like, they're too stressed out about everything. They need to lighten the F up and have fun with life. And booze and drugs are just a good way to have fun with life. That's all that I'm saying, in completely safe ways, which you absolutely can.
That's not for me.
And sex is one of our basic human needs. It just is what it is. This is biological. They need to let go. They need to let themselves be out of control. If they let go and allow themselves to be out of control, they wouldn't be as uptight.
And I think we just have to, I think that's a part of like the integrity that we have to practice as queer people of color. Like, I can't quote unquote indulge in this space when it's actually kind of violent.
God, straight edge people are the most boring people. I'm sorry. They really are, though.
That's not okay. So that's something that I feel like is really something I'm committed to doing. Hopefully I do it, but it's a practice I have.
I think a couple of things. So, like, as a scholar of Black studies, it's important to me to distinguish between respectability politics and the politics of respectability, which are not the same.
What are respectability politics? I don't even know what that means.
And to sort of like
she just
cite
snapped
that distinction. So Evelyn Higginbotham is a Black woman scholar actually at Harvard, who coined the term politics of respectability to talk about how Southern Black church women would adorn themselves and behave in public and in religious spaces in sort of the context of Jim Crow and lynchings. And I bring up that distinction because I agree with what my friends and comrades have said.
Comrades.
And
I should put comrades on bingo.
I want to like be honest about some of the ways that I police myself in order to like stay safe. And I think some of those ways that I police myself and how I show up in public space in particular are remnants of respectability politics or the politics of respectability, depending on how you look at it. So I was thinking about even today. So I did like a curbside pickup for some food today because I had a very long day. I taught 2 classes today, and I just knew that I was not about to cook anything.
Dude, can you imagine taking a class with this kid?
And
can you imagine?
I could like hear myself like make my voice go higher so that when the person came outside, they didn't have this like moment of disconnect of like, you look away, I was not expecting you to. And then like that, because that moment where folks have a disconnect can be a site of extreme violence. And I think like as a Black trans person, I agree that like my race and my gender are one and the same, and I can't think about them separately, which means there are like 2 ways of looking at that.
Yeah,
like,
Patrice is actually making a really good point in the chat that I want to point out. She says they can't get drunk with each other. Imagine slipping up and drawing the wrath of the whole group. Patrice is exactly right. She's exactly right. And this is the saddest thing about this entire woke culture is that they always have to be in control. These kids are going to blow at some point. I mean, my God, like the amount of midlife crises that are going to happen in probably, 10, 15 years? Because this has been going on for like a minute now. Like, I mean, like 10 years at the earliest, like 15 years, we're probably really going to hit it. The epic midlife, because you cannot be pent up for this long. At some point, life is about balance. If you do not allow yourself to be out of control sometimes, then life is going to find a way to put you out of control. And that's when it's all going to go haywire. So mark my words, 15 years from now, we're going to see the midlife crisis people are going to be having. It's going to be epic. I'm going to be a little old lady. I'm going to be just like sitting back and be like, yep, told you so. Told you not to wear those masks. Told you not to do this woke nonsense. Told you so. And now you're paying for it because you're turning your entire life upside down because you had to let go at some point. It's going to be epic. Always find balance, guys. If you are this pent up and in control in one part of your life, you need to find a way to get taken out of control in some other part of your life. And I will reserve judgment on what part of your life that should be, but there are plenty of ways to be taken safely out of control so you get this crap out of your system. Because it will always come around. Every single time.
With other people and in a way to sort of organize. And it means that I have to be thinking about constantly, like, how the police or how the carceral state at large is going to interact with me when I, like, pre-pandemic would like to go to the bathroom in a public place. Like, how am I going to handle that interaction?
You just go to the bathroom.
Be, like, really awkward at best and like really violent and terrible at worst. And so I think like those are
the best case scenario is you go into the bathroom, you walk into the stall, or you do whatever you need to do to go to the bathroom, and I assume it's going to be at a stall, and you go to the bathroom and you leave and no one cares. That's the best case scenario. It's not that it's going to be really awkward at best. It's that it's going to be best case scenario when no one cares. But you know what? For this kid, though, he probably, again, they want people to care. They want people to feel weird. It's not that, that's what they want. That is what the goal is.
Things that I have to be cognizant of all the time. And I think sometimes that policing of myself shows up even when I'm not intentionally making a decision to police myself, but there's something inside my brain and inside my body that says, okay, let's limit the chances of something really terrible and tragic happening to me. Yeah.
Thank you, Jaden, for like giving us that context and reminding us of the vulnerabilities that a lot of folks in our community face on a day-to-day basis in everyday interactions. I think that ties into what Ina was saying about how sometimes, straight POC spaces may be safer than white queer spaces, depending on what the situation is. I think specifically like thinking about the fact that like so many like white queer spaces in Austin, especially like you said, Ina, are like really alcohol based. There's so many people in the community who are in recovery, like that could really be challenging for someone to continue to create community like that. So that y'all are beautiful at doing these transitions into the next question. The next question we have is, in what ways do we see white supremacy manifested in queer spaces today?
Let's define white supremacy. I hope they define it. Let's see.
It's hard because it's like kind of like asking us like, I don't know, the question feels like a trick question because we all are kind of living under white supremacy.
It feels that way because it is
everywhere.
White supremacy.
Maybe that's the context that we also need to tell.
Who in the chat can define critical race theory? And we're going to come back to this. Who in the chat can define critical race theory? Because this girl right here has just given us a clue. Who knows the definition of critical race theory as I have been advancing it for a while? Cow of Judas, thank you for the super sticker. Or Crow of Judas, sorry, not cow, crow, sorry. Crow of Judas, thank you for the super sticker. Who can define critical race theory in the chat? I know you have limited space, so you have to be creative. We'll see if you were paying attention. Critical race theory is an academic ideology that started in the 1970s that says racism exists everywhere in every person and everything and every interaction, and that the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism occurs in every circumstance. Yep, M169 says racism exists everywhere, just gotta find it. She just said the same thing. It's hard to define white supremacy in the context of queerness because white supremacy just exists everywhere.
Tell folks, like, is part of the question too, like, you know, something that actually my partner and I were talking about yesterday or maybe the day before. The days are all melting together, but I was like, oh my god, I can't believe like I'm gonna, you know, be a year older this year. And I was telling her like I'm gonna be older and like I don't feel old and I hate this thing of aging when I still feel really young inside.
Just wait till you hit 40.
She was trying to get me to, you know, tell her like what exactly does that mean. And I was telling her, well, you know, I still feel like baby Ina is in there, like wanting to be loved, and I feel like that need
racist.
of like I need love, like that's gonna be something that I carry with me until like I'm a 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 years old, and I'm just like, when am I gonna grow up? Like, when am I gonna be an adult and not have those feelings? And something that she told, like, she was just like, you know, Ina, like, we live in a white world, like we have to live in a world where oftentimes we have to hide like these basic needs, like the need of being loved. Like, isn't that a need that, you know, you would always carry with you? And just how
they think that young people are the only ones that have need to be loved. How cute. It's so cute to watch people who are young.
How hard it is for us to like live in a world that really,
you know, there was a time when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, that, tell me if you guys can relate to this. There was a time when I was in my 20s where I would look at people that are like my age now, and you know, my age might start with a 4 and end with a 0. But there was times when I was in my 20s and I would look at people that are my age now, I'd be like, those people have it together. They're adults. They know how to adult. I'm gonna have it so together when I'm their age. And now I am that age, and I feel like, you know, it's an interesting thing in this job I'm doing now, because I feel like first of all, I've regressed to being 15 years like younger than I actually am, which is an interesting thing in of itself. But it's also like I was really pent up when I was in my 20s because I thought I had to act responsible and professional, like I saw these adults doing. And then once I actually got to that age, I'm like, none of these people are responsible and professional, so I'm just going to act how I want to act. And I feel like I regressed back to how I probably should have acted in my early 20s. Can anyone else relate to this at all? You like get to that age where you're like, no, I'm not. I don't know how to adult. I just don't. I mean, I can get through the day. It's not like, you know, the wheels aren't coming off the wagon or anything. Like I'm a reasonable adult. I own a house. I'm married. I have cars. I have pets. Like, I've reasonably got it together, but I don't know. It's a weird dynamic.
wasn't made for us in mind, or like made for any of us in mind, right, including white people, but especially for queer people of color. You know, we come from a culture that's real deep, real rich. It goes back.
I feel like, especially like, I feel like my 30s were definitely better than my 20s. Absolutely, my 30s were infinitely better than my 20s. But I feel like once I hit 40, which happened recently, I feel like I just ran out of F's to give. I just ran out. Does anyone else have this feeling? Because truly, I don't know if it's just because I've been attacked so much on the internet, I just don't care anymore. Or like, is it something where you get older and you realize what nonsense like most of your life perceptions are, and you're just like, you know what? Screw it, man. Maybe this is how the midlife crisis starts. You're like, I just and you're like, I mean, I have like all these like older friends, and I realize they're all kind of like me, where we're like, yeah, like we don't really know what we're doing. We can get through the day and stuff, and like it's like being in high school but with money. That's what it's like. It's like being in high school, except you have more money and you know how to earn money. and you know how to like do fun things with that money. But it's not like you don't get more responsible. You just have more money.
back, like in time. And it's like our ideas.
Yeah, Deborah says as you get
of,
older, stuff becomes
what
less
am I trying to
important.
say? Like the
Yes,
way that
it does.
we talk to each other, the way we interact with each other is so full of love and like compassion, and it always just feels like it fills my heart in such a way. But when I'm in spaces outside of queer people of color spaces, or like kind of in the quote unquote real world, everything just feels really harsh. It feels really like abrasive. You know, I feel like I have to be someone else and like hide those needs. And just like my partner's response was just like, you know, that's something you're always gonna need, and it's the world that's wrong. Like the world makes you feel like that's not something you'll need, when you know you always are gonna need empathy and compassion. So I just feel like that's probably the main way that I'm like, you know, recently have been meditating on like, wow, white supremacy will really have you feeling like the most basic things, or somehow like the most luxurious things to ask for. So that's where I'm at.
I think you make a really good point in thinking like, I think the problem is with the way that I worded the question, because we know that, you know, like you were saying, Haran, like fat shaming.
I kind of feel like we're going to have a mass round of confessions when these kids hit 40, where they're going to be like, it was all a lie. We realize now that we were full of shit. I feel like we're going to see that on a mass scale in like 15 years. Like, it was all a lie. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Who knows?
And body shaming is like deeply rooted in anti-Blackness. And so when we think about like what body types we see represented in the queer community, like all of that stuff is rooted in white supremacy too. So I guess the question,
what body types
becomes,
hang on, what body, oh, I got something in my eye. What body types represented in the queer community is white supremacy? Okay. I'm sure the fact that gay men tend to like other really super fit gay men is just a factor of white supremacy. I'm sure that has nothing to do with just men liking sex. Oh,
are there specifically different ways that white supremacy shows up in queer spaces than it does in straight spaces?
Yes, enlighten us about straight spaces. None of them know.
I don't know if it's white supremacy as much as it's like neoliberalism. And like I think the way that so if we take, for instance, like a regular degular pride parade, for example. So at Pride, wherever you are in the world, it will look very similar. There will be like alcohol ads and you know, folks with their kids and their dogs and stuff, and everybody's having a good time. There'll be people who you know, are like embracing their bodies, being like out here free. And there will also be police, and there will be lots of police. There will be police in uniform.
What?
There will be police with pride flags, waving them. There will be police at the entrances and exits. There will be police in plain clothes that you don't recognize as police, but are cops.
What?
And I think there is a particular way that neoliberalism shows up in white, cis, queer spaces that is like so sinister, because there is this idea that we have something in common because we're both quote unquote different. And like that could be a place for solidarity. But I think like, but that's not always the case. That actually it's not our quote unquote difference that is our point of connection. It's like, what are our politics? Because I actually don't know if me and you can form or like our organizations could form solidarity with each other if your politics are that you think it's okay that the cops are at Pride, or
he just said the quiet part out loud. What time? What is the timestamp of this? 35 minutes. Let's listen to this again. Let's listen to him talk about how it's not about identity group at all. It's not about white supremacy. It's not about being queer or not. It's not about being cis, heterodox, white, whatever. It is all about politics. And if you don't subscribe to the same politics as his groups, it doesn't matter how many intersecting oppressed identities you have. It's all about politics. Let's hear him say this again. Start around the 35-minute mark.
that is like so sinister, because there is this idea that we have something in common because we're both quote unquote different. And like that could be a place for solidarity. But I think but that's not always the case. That actually it's not our quote unquote difference that is our point of connection. It's like, what are our politics? Because I actually don't know if me and you can form, or like our organizations could form solidarity with each other.
PhD student.
If your politics are that you think it's okay that the cops are at Pride, or you think it's okay that a lot of folks' understanding of even the AIDS crisis is that it ended. Like, if that is your politics, then I don't think that we can actually align, even though we share the same sexual orientation or gender identity. Because politically, I don't understand you, because cops have no place in Pride, because Pride was an uprising. And
I'm gonna
the
clip
AIDS
the hell out of
crisis
this.
didn't end. It ended for white cis gay men, but it did not end for the vast majority of the world who.
What did I say? The AIDS crisis ended for white cis gay men. They don't consider gay men oppressed anymore.
Are still dying at absurd numbers because the United States has hoarded important medical research and also supplies and is not given that to the rest of the world. And even to like Black poor folks within the United States have not increased access to AIDS medication. And yeah, I'm ranting. I'll stop.
Oh no, keep going, darling. Keep going. Please keep going.
I'm just saying this real quick, Huron. Something that Jaden just made me think about is like, I think the biggest, like, I don't know, like, it just is such a side of pain for me, but like one of the biggest.
Yeah, Patrice, I got you. I'll fix it. I'll make it available.
Tricks that white supremacy performed was convincing people of color that queerness is a white thing, to the point where like we can't, like, we're not.
What? I'm sorry? When was queerness about being white at all? That's just not true. She made that up. That was made up.
The faces people think of when they think of queerness as people of color, you know, they think of white people, and that's so sad. That makes me so sad. Okay, I'll let you go, Heron. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Yeah, that's definitely important to highlight. And like what Jaden was saying though was like specifically with that statement about cops at Pride and like why, and it's how white supremacy is manifesting in that queer space specifically is like the allowance. You're basically allowing racism, anti-Blackness, and transphobia to be happening in a space that you deem queer friendly, but it's not queer friendly to Black and brown queer people or trans people.
So what they're saying is that Pride is not friendly to Black and brown and trans people when the police are allowed there. That's what they're insinuating. How much do you want to bet that all 4 of these kids also think that the police are a relic of the slave trade?
Because of the fact that you know the violence that they've done and continue to do and have built big, oh, I was about to cuss, big structures to do, you know? They literally,
Oh.
they've committed to
Like
this.
systemic structures?
Violence. And so
it's just
also
violence.
thinking about
It's violence. It's violence.
Capitalism and pride, and I think that's like also been on my mind a lot because of
capitalism. Bingo. Please tell me I have put capitalism on the bingo card. If I haven't put capitalism on the bingo card, capitalism needs to be on the bingo card. There it is again. Capitalism. Let's go from the police talking about how the police are violent without giving any examples of how the police are violent. 0 examples were given. It's just violence. It's violence. The police are violence. They're violence. Black, brown, and trans bodies is not safe to be a pride if the police are there because it's just violence. No examples given. No concrete examples. No statistics. No nothing. And then transition right into capitalism. Right into capitalism, which is what she means when she's talking about the power structures, because whiteness is not about race. Whiteness is about who owns the power structure. That's what it is.
How white supremacy is manifested in queer spaces, how, businesses are now, saying that they are queer friendly and they're down for pride. And, thinking about the messaging of that. But also at the same time, when Black folks have been dying for years, it's been crickets. And there
really?
Are folks, and not to mention there are
really?
Black people celebrating pride. And
it was crickets. It was crickets. This was on August 31st, 2020. What is this YouTube channel? Hang on. I'm just going to pull up some other stuff. I'm just going to see. This is August 31st, 2020. It's just crickets when Black people die. It's just... what else was happening on August 31st, 2020? You guys want to name some things that were probably happening on August 31st, 2020 and why they were happening?
It's only
crickets.
Like half. We'll accept one aspect of you. So for capital though, it's not even for like rights.
For capital.
Either way. So it's like they tricked again with the tricking in queer spaces, thinking that like, oh, these businesses are in solidarity with us because they have a rainbow flag. They are offering a 20% discount during June. Different things like that.
Did I say August or October?
Has manifest like that's one way.
I meant
and,
August.
Like, got us thinking
if I said
that
October, I meant
actually
August.
Care about our well-being.
Not
but
Halloween.
At the same time, like, where are their products being made? Where?
Riots.
Who's making them? And then at the same time, who's getting paid as an influencer to promote them?
Who's getting paid? Capitalism.
So it's like, ooh. So it's like, that's one of the spaces that is definitely manifested. And beyond like just the many, like, it's not different though, I would say, because that happens in so many different spaces, like the capitalization of that. But yeah. Oh, somebody said AAV. I was gonna say that too. I was actually thinking about like one of these moments. I don't know if I should say it specifically, but it was just
yes, you should, honey.
It was with a cis white man. And he just kept calling me the B word. He's like, yes, he kept saying to me, and I'm like a person who I hold these, like, I don't know, I'm still a Black woman, and like, you're still a white man calling me that. And like, if you don't recognize that dynamic, and this is the first time we met, and I do not know you, you cannot call me that, period. But but they say like, oh, it's just a part of the culture. Whose culture that? Who's saying like, who's been saying these things and like referring to each other like cis, different things like that. Like, like you can't call me cis. You can't. So just different things like that.
I will say that I'm gonna actually take her team on this one. I will say that Brandon Tatum did a whole apology video calling me cis the whole time. Like and I really didn't like it. I really did not like it. But mostly I didn't like it because he talked shit about Brandon Strauch in another video, and he refused to apologize for lying about me to his 1.5 million subscribers. He said, I'm sorry, but can you really blame me for how you look, sis? So I get that. I get it. It was annoying.
Yeah, Cindy, cultural theft, cultural appropriation absolutely definitely still exists in queer spaces. I appreciate you stating that for us. For folks who were not in attendance, Q+EDU did a wonderful panel on the effects of the prison industrial complex on the LGBTQ+ community. So I'd highly encourage y'all to check that one out. We also recently did one on LGBTQ plus immigration activism. So other topics that are related to what we're talking about here today. Let's see, we've only got about 15 minutes left, so I want to move on. How can Black and Brown folks create space for themselves to experience their queerness in a way that feels authentic?
I think in a lot. Oh, are you going?
Go for it. No, go for it.
Okay. I think that like those spaces are always already created. Like from a very, very micro level, I'm thinking about like my friendship and comradeship with my panelists.
Comradeship.
Like, we kick it together and we form those sort of like micro communities together, and we don't need to have like a Facebook group. Like we found each other, and like we will be friends as long as we are alive. And like that, those sorts of ties can't really be manufactured in a like, let me go looking for like the Black trans queer people. Like we find each other. And I think that that's what's so special, particularly about Black and Brown queer and trans people, is that we don't need to have like we don't need to send out a carrier pigeon. We just naturally find each other. We're in some space where somebody's doing something annoying, and then we are like, who's the person who also thinks this is annoying? And then we find each other. And then we find out that, oh, this person is actually queer. Like, I didn't know, but I figured so because I like them. And
he basically just defined any grievance studies field, didn't he? Where he was like, we just found something that we thought was annoying, and then we found other people who thought that was annoying. He basically just defined it. It was fabulous.
Magical about us is that we just do it naturally, and maybe there's some like sociological cues that we pick up on or something, but I like to think that like our spirits just get gravitated towards each other. And like in that we form friendships, we form partnerships, but we also form like organizations, and we struggle together that way.
Yeah, I just want to pick up. I feel like something that Jaden reminded me of is like, you know, we're definitely, there's this coalescing and kind of moving towards one another. And as me as a non-Black person and a non-Indigenous person, I do feel like oftentimes there's harm that's also caused within, you know, queer people of color communities. But you know, a lot of what I feel like our work has been, at least in all that I've experienced in my time being in queer people of color communities, it feels like we really work hard to hold ourselves accountable to stuff, hold each other accountable, and like not dispose of each other. Like I feel like we just don't have the luxury, or I don't know if it's luxury or like privilege. I don't feel like it's a luxury to throw people away, but maybe a privilege to be like, I'm done with you. You know, I think that culture it's hard for us. It's really toxic, and it's hard for us to keep up with that kind of culture. And in queer people of color communities, especially, you know, within the most like impacted communities in our world, like Black and Indigenous like people who are queer and trans, we cannot throw those people away, because the outside world, whatever harm they have caused us, will never be worth the harm that the outside world can cause them, if that makes sense. And I just feel like that's the kind of work that we do. We're not disposing of people. You're not, you know, you're not replaceable. You're like, we need you, and we want you to stay with us so that we can continue building community. And I will say that like my own personal experiences of like being in community with Black and Brown queer folks has just been so fulfilling, and they're out there. You know, if y'all are here, y'all can come to Algo events. Like earlier today, we had 2 queer and trans Latinx healers in San Antonio, like talk about queer how queer plants are and how queer nature is, and like they did an herb walk, and we got to talk about like all of the indigenous plants that they're planting and taking care of, and it was just so beautiful, and like we cried. It was just so beautiful. And there were straight people there, there were white people there were queer people of color there, but actually no, there were not white people there. It was only a people of color space. But in those spaces we really like build with each other. Those spaces already exist. Like I hope I pronounced their name right. Alicia said in the chat, like we already have those spaces. And I just feel like it's about, just venturing out a little bit, doing some Google searches, asking around. But we exist. Like we're really out here. We've been, building community and doing events and coming together for a long, long time.
Yeah.
They're all just so oppressed.
Definitely.
They're
I
all
know
so
myself,
oppressed.
I always love going to Algo events. But also thinking of, I don't know if necessarily, like, it's not role models per se, but just like those people in your life, specifically like those Black and brown trans people who remind you and inspire you, and I don't know, show like just like I don't know how to describe it, but they challenge you also, because you don't ever want to be static, not only just in the sense of like learning more about yourself, understanding yourself, but for the sake of like the world, and like folks who are being oppressed in a way that you do not experience, challenging that. It's finding somebody in the community that challenges that in you and challenges that in themselves and others, like, and seeing that.
I genuinely wonder what she thinks about what women in Afghanistan are about to go through, and how that may have changed her view of oppression. I genuinely wonder that, because she has no sense. None of these kids, I'm sorry, they're kids, and they may be adults, but they're kids. None of these kids have any idea what true oppression looks like. Not a single one of them.
That, and like listening to that, being attention to that, and knowing that that is possible. And it doesn't have to be like it's not necessarily to say to put people on a pedestal per se, but to pay attention to those folks who are inspiring you, and show you how to exist. Like this is not only worthy of love, but it should be fought for, not just for yourself, but for others. And it's important to do so. And so I'm thinking like in those spaces, and being like, when you're talking about being authentic, like, having that space where you can be authentic and somebody that's challenging you to always make that space not just okay, like, beyond welcoming. Like, I don't even know what the words for it yet, but just something that's just so.
I don't want to send them to Afghanistan. That would be horrible and awful, and they would not survive. I wouldn't wish that fate on anyone, right? But they have no sense of this. They have absolutely no sense of what it means to really be oppressed. And this is why, like, and they have no appreciation for what they have too. That's the other thing, is they have zero appreciation for what they have. And that's sad. It's sad that they have not been taught to truly appreciate the miracle that those of us in the United States have been given. And in other places around the world too. I don't want to act like, the US is the only privileged place in the world, because God knows that there are people around the world who have it a lot better than women in the Middle East. But the fact that they just have never been taught to appreciate it at all, again, that's not their fault. It is not their fault at all that they have all been taught to be pod people, and that they've never been taught what true oppression feels like, or they've never been taught how good they really have it. That's a sad thing.
Amazing. And finding those people in your life, and they can be like, they don't have to be like, it can be like friends, like literally straight up friends, and like my friends inspire me all the time. And just being attentive to that, and like kind of letting it shape from there.
Thanks, y'all. I was gonna ask if you had like tips or tricks for like young queer people of color who feel like they don't know any other queer people of color on like how to find community, but I think you covered it.
like, I mean, even online too, I was going to say that too. Like, there are some accounts, I swear, the most, I don't want to say education, because you definitely should pay folks too. If they're out here educating people, they're putting long threads together, they got all the evidence, all the receipts, they're doing the work, please compensate them. But also, like, give them their flowers now, celebrate them now. Like, take that and really, when you are finding that space, like, taking that knowledge with you and making sure that that space is there for everybody. And also, maybe that can help you find a space for you too. Like, online spaces, I mean, they're great in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I learned a lot from like YouTubers. I know that like young people today probably don't watch YouTube anymore, but like TikTok is probably your like learning source. So like I learned a lot from those.
Young people today don't watch YouTube anymore. It's just for the boomers. Just us boomers on YouTube, guys. It's just us. We have to hold down the fort. I don't even watch YouTube either, to be fair.
People, and even though like I never actually reached out to them personally, like I think even just having a space where someone somewhere said something that felt like familiar was really comforting for me as I was like coming out as a high school student at like an all-white Catholic school in Oklahoma, where like, yeah, I mean, I don't need to go into details about what that experience was. You can probably deduce it was
They
not
are
great.
calling you old, Jan. They are. They're calling
so
all
like,
of us
yeah,
old.
having
They
online
are.
communities, but also trusting
true.
that like, even if you were like the only out person that you know who's like Black or brown, like trust and believe there are queer and trans people around you. They just may not express their queerness or transness in the same way that you do. And that doesn't make them any less
Goddamn
valid.
right, watch
It
locals.
just means that like,
damn right, Tony.
Yeah, it means that you maybe need to change the way that you relate to people. But yeah, there are so many different ways that we can find community, even when it feels like super isolating.
Yeah, I would say I think it's really hard for people of color in general to find mentorship and to find, people who are older than them, experienced, can kind of guide them. I think it's just really hard in general, but even especially when it comes to like queer and trans people of color, it feels even harder sometimes to find that. So I do understand, like if you're struggling with finding that space, that's so real.
We're all old and
real,
queer.
We I think we have all kind of experienced that to a certain extent. And I think the only thing I can say when you're experiencing that is just be patient and like just know like what Jaden said exactly. Like there's so many people in high school that I hung out with, like we were really close. We were all part of debate. We would like do, we'd be on the bus, we'd be partying around on the bus. We just had a good time, and it wasn't.
They're reminiscing about people from high school. Is this what it felt like to be my parents? I'm seriously asking. I might be having a midlife crisis starting on. We only have like 10 minutes left of this. The midlife crisis is starting. Is this what it feels like? Is this what it felt like to be my parents when my parents were my age? I'm asking for the older people in the chat. I'm starting to feel really self-conscious. I'm not gonna lie. They're reminiscing about high school. I can't ask my parents, Amba. We don't talk anymore. I can't ask them. I have to ask you guys. You guys are all I have. After the great revelation of Trump supporters not being Nazis, you guys are all I have. I have to ask you. Oh my god. They're in their 20s and are reminiscent of high school. I can't. God damn it.
It wasn't until college that I learned like a lot
now
of
we
those
can just feel
people
sorry
are
for
queer.
ourselves.
And I was like, what? Like, you're queer? I'm queer? Like, oh my God. We've been little gayies since like we were little, like we were high school. So you don't know. And I feel like and most of my friends who, I had that experience with were Black and Latinx folks. And, you know, we just didn't really have the space to be like,
Yeah, high school
I'm
sucked.
queer, so let me be, you know, like representing
Really
that
sucked.
in high school when I'm living with my parents. Like, we just didn't have the space to do that. And I'm sorry that we didn't. Maybe it's easier for folks now to do that. I don't know, but just trust that the people you're with, you're there for a reason. If you feel good and safe with folks, even if they're not necessarily out as labeled as queer, you know, as people of color,
You can still be safe with people who aren't queer.
Never been a place of like identity or identification for us.
Yeah,
You know,
they don't have to be
we've
queer for
always
you to be
had our
safe
own
around
ways of
them. It's
moving and, like,
okay.
identifying and coalescing. Has always been beyond this.
Okay, I'm going to acknowledge that this is probably the beer talking. I'm going to acknowledge that. But is it possible? We need to consider ideas. I think I know what you guys are going to say. Is it possible that our reaction to this woke bullshit is just a generational difference? Is it possible that our reaction to all of the nonsense that is coming out of these four people's mouths, which was put there by their college professors and through no fault of their own, is it possible that this is just a generational difference? And that the younger people that might agree with us, like Jaya, that it's possible that they're just old souls? Am I making stuff up? I'm probably making stuff up. No, it's actually legitimately crazy. But like, I just want to do a gut check. Is it possible that this is just a generational thing where us old people are like, when we were young, we did not talk about race all the time, and we didn't even care if you were Black? I'm just saying we should consider it. I'm just
colonial
saying.
language. So just
It really would be best case scenario, wouldn't it? It would be best case if this was just a generational difference and the kids would grow out of it once they got a real job and learned what paying taxes means and learned that capitalism could actually bring them more money and more freedom and security than they ever thought possible if they just build a business or become really successful in the world. And then it's actually a good thing that the government doesn't own the means of production. Could they have that realization as they get older and get out into the real world and they're like, maybe I don't want to work at the Starbucks. Maybe I want to own the Starbucks and become a capitalist. Or maybe I want to own the apartment building and become a landlord. Is it possible that this is a phase that this entire generation could grow out of? I'm just asking. I think it's worthy of asking the question, okay?
Safe, like that the people you're around them for a reason. You feel good with them. It's for a reason, and just trust your intuition when it comes to that stuff.
That's probably the appropriate reaction.
That. Yes, absolutely. Yes, trust your intuition. If you are someone in middle school or high school, anywhere in the state of Texas, and you want to start a Gender and Sexuality Alliance Club, hit me up. That's what I do. I can help with that. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to go through this next question extremely quickly because I don't want to be centering whiteness. But if y'all could give us like your like top one thing that white allies can do to aid in the process.
How many white allies we got in the chat? Hey, hey, white allies.
Move out of the way. And I mean that in all aspects of the term, like physically move, but also like stop censoring yourself.
Emotionally move out of the way.
I think there's a way that white people who are like trying to do better, like still center themselves as they're trying to do better by saying like, you know, I'm white, I understand I'm white, like I'm trying to be an accomplice and not an ally, and I just don't know, and I just need help, and
I'm happy not to help you at all, dude. I am happy not to help you in any way, shape, or form. I'm perfectly happy with that. Fine. Accepted. Your terms are accepted.
Yeah, so similar to that, like that kind of decentering requires, you know, giving up things, power, space, privilege. And I know it's something that a lot of white folks either don't want to do, like they know they need to, and
I'm fine.
or they haven't.
I will move right out the way.
They are taking up so much space yet, but that's also the privilege of not knowing that they're even aware of how much space is also a privilege. So so really not only checking that, because it's like, what good is checking your privilege do if it's like not actually gonna lead to the next action? Like recognizing that you do have power and privilege in this space. Okay, well then what are you gonna do with that? Like, you know, so then that's where it comes to stepping, like literally moving aside. And then
You're right,
one
it's
of the things
gonna
I
do
was
no
thinking
good.
of is I think what I've been seeing a lot online is like a lot of folks with like what's been happening now with just like my gosh, I just hope it doesn't get memeified is what I'm saying, is that like the like literally the oppression that white people are doing to Black and brown bodies, like on
Bodies,
like,
bodies,
camera,
bingo.
you know, and or just, you know, and it's, and a lot of white people will say, or not a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, I hate white people. Like white people be like, oh my gosh, I can't stand white people. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm looking away. But it's like, you can't look away. That's you, that's y'all. You know, you can't detach yourself from the system that, and the institution the house that you're born into. You can't detach yourself from the house that you're born into. And so when folks say that, it's like even saying that's a privilege, because if a non-white person said that, they would lose their job in an instant, you know, so really thinking of the privilege in being able to say that, and how being able to say that,
yes,
it does
I am
center,
privileged.
it brings it back
Absolutely.
to centering whiteness, but also like distancing yourself from it at the same time as being like, that's some other thing, that as if there was something that they couldn't play into. So really being mindful of whenever you are then calling in or calling out in whatever language you like to use.
I have to add calling in or calling
you know,
out to the bingo card too.
People who are implementing and using oppressive tactics, you know, because of their white identity, because of white supremacy, you know, really acknowledging the connection that you do.
I don't think that's the problem.
And does that mean
it's
that
not
you're
the problem.
also, but yeah,
Nope.
that's kind of where I'm thinking. I'll say one because you said keep it short. So.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. That was great.
Thanks, y'all. So we have 2 minutes left if y'all want to give a closing statement, or if you would rather answer the last question that we have in the pre-written stuff, which is, what can we do to alter the larger national and international conversation about what queerness looks like? So feel free to answer that or leave us with other thoughts. But thank you all so much. And I don't know why we didn't schedule this for an hour and a half.
That's okay. I'll be really quick. There's already a lot of work happening in the world, in this country. You know, like if you're Asian Pacific Islander, totally look up NCAPIA, National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Association.
National
if, you're
Queer
out in the world, just
Asian
Google,
Pacific Islander
Google is your friend.
Association.
If you have that
All
ability,
right.
please do so. And yeah, come check out our events at Algo. We're having some really cool virtual events. We're actually having an event on Sunday called Supporting Ourselves Through Self-Care Tools. So I hope we can see y'all there.
Yeah, so I would suggest a few organizations. So my sort of world is around abolition. So if you are interested in
Abolition
that,
of the police.
I would suggest getting involved with a couple national organizations. Black and Pink, which is an abolitionist organization that specifically tries to get resources and get people free.
Free
Black,
of what?
Queer and trans people specifically. And then the other national organization I would plug is
abolish prisons. That's what it is.
BYP 100, which is a Black queer feminist organization. And an event that's happening that folks might be interested in, actually, like right now, is the Black National Convention. So the Movement for Black Lives is hosting.
Oh, you guys got to see this Black and Pink website. We'll look at this in a sec. Hang on. We'll look at it in a sec.
Gathering online.
This is gold.
Online. A gathering of folks to talk about Black political agendas. So there are some like folks from Pose who are going to be there, and organizers and whatnot. So I would encourage folks to check that out.
Thanks, y'all. I wish I had more resources to share, but I think kind of to say what Ina was saying, but yeah, like this is already happening around the world and has been happening throughout time, and I think that's what really gives me hope. to know about like what this conversation will look like, or what it will continue to look like, what it has looked like, all the different ways it may be looking like right at this very second, like imagining people having conversations kind of like what we're having around the world and like what we don't know about, like that gives me also hope, knowing that that's out there, and knowing that we can collectively unite and kind of, there's already some examples of ways that we can connect.
This is fantastic. Thank you all so much. I am secretly excited that I got to be the moderator, learn.
All right,
so
guys,
much from
that's
y'all
the
and get to
end
interact
of
with
this.
you.
It looks like, but listen, hang on. I want to show you guys this black and pink thing real quick before we conclude for the day. Check this out. They just mentioned this black and pink abolitionist organization. Oh, hang on, I'll take this banner down. Check this out. Black and pink. We fight to abolish prisons. We fight for basic human rights. Black and Pink is a prison abolitionist organization dedicated to abolishing the criminal punishment system. They've changed it from criminal justice to criminal punishment system, and liberating LGBTQIA2S plus people and people living with HIV/AIDS who are affected by that system through advocacy, support, and organizing. Black and Pink International, founded in 2005, now has a strong grassroots network of 11 volunteer-led chapters and more than 20,000 current and formerly incarcerated LGBTQIA2S2 plus and people living with HIV/AIDS members located across the country. And we have lots of statistics. Look at that good, diverse group of people. I'm going to spend some time on that website. I'm going to just pop this website in the chat if you guys want to take a look at it. Yeah, I don't know what the other S is. I have no idea. The S2, I don't know. I have no idea. All right, guys, thank you for coming out for happy hour today. I'm going to go chill out because, again, I'm not feeling so great. I'm sorry I was a little bit low energy today. I'm just like, I'm just tired. That's all it is. I'm not sick or anything. I don't have the dreaded COVID. I'm fine. Just not feeling great. So I'm going to go chill for the rest of the night, celebrate my husband's birthday with him. I think I heard him return home while I was on the stream, but if you would like to join my locals community, that would be awesome. Obviously, I am banned on my main YouTube channel for another week because of a stupid mistake that YouTube made. You can still catch me on Actively Unwoke for happy hour on Fridays because I've always been streaming Actively Unwoke on Fridays on this channel, YouTube. You can also catch me on Odyssey and Rockfin. But Locals is the place where you're really going to interact with me the most. kb.locals.com. It is free to join. You can check it out, see if it's for you, look at some ad-free videos. But if you really want to support the work I'm doing, you can become a supporter. You can become a monthly supporter at $5 a month or more if you want to, but don't feel any obligation. $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. And you can also make one-time donations at my locals, and I greatly appreciate all the new people who've been joining my locals since this second stupid YouTube strike went into effect. I really appreciate it, guys. We have debate club tomorrow in locals. We'll be doing debate club for supporters at 2 p.m. So make sure you come out for that. It should be a really good debate. And if not, I will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon.